All right, good morning. Thank you all for being here today. My name is Kirsten Patton. I'm a consultant here at ATARC, which is the Advanced Technology Academic Research Center. I want to thank everyone for coming out and joining us this morning for our Data Management Breakfast Summit, and a special thanks to our partners, Denodo and Tableau, for helping us make today's event possible. For those who might be unfamiliar with ATARC, or this is your first event, ATARC is a nonprofit organization that facilitates collaboration between government, industry, and academia in order to drive technology modernization initiatives. We provide ongoing opportunities for cross-agency collaboration through on-site interaction, learning, and market research. So to start this morning off, we are going to hear a keynote from Peter Sima-Eichler, who is the Director of the Data Office within the Office of the Inspector General at the U.S. Department of Interior. So please help me welcome up Peter to the front so he can give his keynote.
Just test out mic or no mic. Does this sound good or? All right. So thank you all so much for having me today. I really appreciate it. About 10 years ago, I was trying to get information about a legacy financial system at my department. If it had what I thought it had, it was going to be a big difference maker for our teams. It would have the data that we needed to support our projects. So I talked to a bunch of different people. I sent emails asking about schemas and data dictionaries. I requested source information for some canned reports that I'd seen floating around. Anyway, after what felt like 40 different emails and phone calls, someone finally said, "Oh, you need to talk to Jim." So after meeting with Jim, I realized that he, himself, just him, was the data management system. You needed a report? Yeah. You needed to talk to Jim. You needed to know about a field? You needed to talk to Jim. You even wanted to know what data was available in the system? Yeah, you guessed it. You needed to talk to Jim. There was no documentation. There's no easy application for accessing the information, no nothing. So this silly sounding, but I swear 100% true, story has probably come up in all of your careers. This was the only Jim data management system that I've ever encountered. But I've since worked with a Judy system, a Timmy system, a TJ system, and many, many others. So when we consider data management for our organizations, we want to do everything that we can to avoid the Jim model. We don't want a single point of failure. We don't want to gatekeep expertise. And we don't want to separate the subject matter experts from the data that they need to make decisions. Instead, during this keynote, I'm going to argue that one major goal of data management should be to decentralize knowledge and empower the rest of your organization. Specifically, I want to talk about 1, putting clean, easy-to-use data in the hands of your subject matter experts, and 2, building a culture of data literacy at your organization. So let's dive right in. Getting data in the hands of your SMEs. I work in an oversight organization staffed by federal investigators with extensive training and CPAs with tremendous amounts of accounting and audit knowledge. This is a lot of specialized expertise. Our data people know data, but that does not give them the accounting knowledge of our CPAs, the fraud-finding instincts of our investigators, or the human capital vision of our executive team. In other words, just because there is data, it doesn't mean that DBAs or data scientists are the right people to answer or really even ask the right research questions. That's why it's critical to make data accessible to the true subject matter experts in any given area. So empower the CPA by assembling all of the messy financials in an easy-to-use report. Put the countless different contract and grant-related systems into a clean dash for the investigator and let them slice and dice the data with their own expertise. And visualize hiring and attrition data for the executives. In other words, give your subject matter experts the ability to work with data like data scientists. I know what you're probably thinking. No organization ever wants to make it hard for people to work with data. We want people to use the data that we provision. We want people to use the tools that we're trying to give them. And yet, I so often in my work see a disconnect where there is terrific data available, but the people who should be using it just don't quite feel comfortable accessing it. So breaking down the barriers to working with data is a core goal of our data management strategy at the Department of the Interior. From my experience, it's about more than just making the tools available or designing something that we think users will want. Instead, it's about getting users to adopt and really benefit from that data. And to do that, we have to think very intentionally about how we roll things out. So at my office, we focus on building connections between the data management side and the end users. Two main things. One, we create spaces where collaboration can happen organically. And two, we don't build things for users. We partner with our users to build things. So to create spaces for collaboration, we host a monthly meeting for anyone in our organization who's interested in learning about or being involved with data. The bar is low. If you want to attend, you can just show up. You don't have to show up every month. You just show up when you want. You don't even have to send me an email. You just have to show up. As a result, we have virtually every component represented. We have auditors, investigators, management functions like IT and procurement, and office functions, front office functions like external affairs, strategic planning, and legal. We also have a range of experience. We've got everybody from brand new auditors to federal service, to special agents in charge, to our senior leaders. In advance of the meeting, my team posts updates that are available to everybody in the organization. And at our meeting, our team members demo and discuss their recent projects to get feedback from the group. We don't let our attendees off the hook either. We try to get people to share what they're working on as well, so that we figure out a way to hook them. If you can solve a specific problem that someone is working on with data or a tool that you have available or can build for them, that's how you get them hooked. Once people know that you can help them solve their problems with the tools that you provide, they're in. They're all in and they're ready to join. And our real ace in the hole for leveraging this type of collaboration and creating these networks between our data program and all of the end users in our organization is a special group of staff that we call Tier 2. As you might imagine, at an office of accountants, investigators dedicated to financial crimes, HR specialists, and other management specialists, we have more than our share of spreadsheet wizards. So our data team is dedicated exclusively to data, but these Tier 2 folks are not. Although they're regularly connected with our data team by emails, chat groups, and the standing meetings I was talking about before, they work primarily as auditors, investigators, and management support. But they also have a lot of data expertise. Therefore, they help us with triage. So they're embedded in teams throughout our organization. And when those teams need help with, a quick Excel question or a little data analysis question, they're the people that help. But they're also our eyes and ears. So if there's something large, if there's something complex, if there's a real need bubbling up from somewhere in our organization, they know to take it right to us. So we always know about the key needs as they're emerging in our organization. They also, of course, help do data literacy initiatives, help us demo and beta test our tools, and work with us on a number of other things as well. By having these sorts of touch points for collaboration, we have a fairly deep understanding of what our users need and how they can most benefit from our data. We aren't sequestered in a data cave, hidden away from the rest of the organization, and only emerging to periodically toss new data products out into the wild. As a result, we don't build things for our users. We partner with our users from the beginning all the way through the process to build them the tools that they need. I'll give you an example. Our auditors and investigators need hands-on access to financial data, particularly information related to contracts and grants. So ultimately, we ended up with an integrated data product that combines information from our internal financial systems with entity data from the System for Award Management, with procurement data from the Federal Procurement Data System, with subrecipient data from the Federal Subrecipient Reporting System, with single audit data from the Federal Audit Clearinghouse. And we integrated all of those sources into a nice, easy to use platform that our users can, slice and dice with risk flags. But the road there was a process. I know everybody in this audience builds those types of tools and works on solutions to create those types of tools for federal customers. But as you know, it's a process. So to do it, we didn't just vanish into a room. We didn't go into our little data cave. Instead, we met with a group of subject matter experts right up front in contracts and grants, the core users who we wanted to start using our tool right up front. They gave us great ideas for guiding our work. We included our tier 2. We talked about it at the monthly data program meetings. We got their requirements. We got their key risk flags, and we got their essential data elements that absolutely had to be in the end state. Then, as we worked, we provided regular updates at those meetings. We got feedback. As soon as we were far enough along for testing, we conducted numerous pilots with our auditors, with our investigators, with folks throughout the organization who we hoped would use it. And when we piloted, we weren't just checking to see whether it worked. We were looking to see what new features we could add, how we could tweak it to make sure that they would really adopt it. We didn't just go for functionality. We wanted it to be something that they would really use on a daily basis. Once our key users were satisfied and our quality assurance processes were in place, we checked our access and we launched. That's the approach that we take to building every single tool at our organization. We think about specifically data accessibility. And I'm not just talking about accessibility as in ability to connect users with data. What I mean by accessibility is making sure that anyone with a business need is not just able to get to the data, but that they feel comfortable using their data in the format that works best for them. We sometimes joke about providing data your way, like the Burger King commercials from the 1990s. It isn't just about building the right infrastructure, having the right tool, optimizing ETL. It's also about putting that exact same energy, as I know many folks in this room are aware of, into the front end and business intelligence layers and the reporting layers to make sure that your users are ultimately getting what they need. And this access to data can be transformational for our organizations. I joined Interior nearly 3 years ago to build our data team. In the first year, we built out our infrastructure, including connecting our auditors and investigators with the data that I was talking about earlier. At our organization of under 300 people, we had over 10,000 unique uses of our tools in the first year after launch. This year, we're on pace for over 40,000 unique uses. And more than volume, we hear so many stories about the ways access to data has helped. Identifying successful proactive fraud cases, saving months on audits by having the data right up front and ready to go, and giving executives and managers the tools they need to answer any personnel or project management related question instantly instead of having to send out multiple emails for ad hoc analysis. The list just goes on. Putting data into the hands of the people who need it and making sure that they have the ability to really dig into their data empowers the right people to make the right decisions. The next panel is going to talk about exactly that. With good data management, there should be no friction between the data and your subject matter experts. They're informed, they have what they need, and they can apply their expertise to critical situations as they arise. I spent a lot of time talking about meeting users where they are with data. Consider their needs, partner with them as you build your strategy for data management, and focus not just on giving people the data they need, but making sure that they are truly able to use it. But there is also another piece. While meeting users where they are, also consider how you, as a data management professional, can help them up their game. And for that, I want to briefly turn to my second topic. Consider data literacy as part of your organization's data management strategy. Data literacy just means the ability to work with and understand data. It doesn't mean that everyone needs to be able to program in Python or query tables in SQL. However, modern organizations are absolutely full of data, and we need every single person on our teams to not be too timid to dip their toes into our data lake. So how can we as data management professionals help? Well, for one, the partnerships I spoke about earlier between data professionals and the other SMEs in your organization will go a long way. It'll teach your data people the real guts of the mission work that you're trying to support, and it'll also elevate your SMEs' fluency with data. But beyond that, there are a number of things that we can do to help, including data literacy assessments to baseline your organization, formal training programs in your office-specific core competencies, informal information sharing, and hands-on experience with your curated tools. Before I joined my current organization, my leadership had already sent out a data literacy assessment to get a sense of where we were. A data literacy assessment can help your employees indicate their familiarity with different applications, whether they feel comfortable tapping into existing data systems and resources, what their business needs are, and where they would like to grow, what sort of role they want to have in your data program. I can tell you that when I came in to build that office 3 years ago, having this assessment in hand right as soon as I walked in the door was an absolute difference maker. I use that to think through growth areas, the personnel we could tap for the tier 2 program I was talking about earlier, trainings that we wanted to roll out in the future, vendors that we needed to reach out to, and data systems and resources that we needed to quickly get our arms around. As we grew in capacity, we developed an in-house training program to meet some of those needs. Many of the people in our organization were proficient with simple tools, but we needed to build opportunities to expand that curriculum, to give them more. So our tier 2 puts on some basic analysis courses, and then our data team supplements by providing more detailed demos of the tools that we roll out to our organization and the different data resources that are available. We paired this formal training with more informal training. Instead of sending out a link to one of our tools, we try to grab time with our users to show them how to use that tool. Instead of sending out a spreadsheet, we try to show users how to pull that data themselves. The more people that actually put hands on the data they need and the tools that will help them analyze it, the more comfortable they will be with data. It's one of the absolute best ways that we can build data literacy from the ground up. And I know there's no time for that. We're swamped, you're swamped, I'm swamped, everybody is swamped. But teaching people how to access the information themselves and how to really use the tools that you build will save you tremendous amounts of time in the long run. Pay for it up front. Save future you the trouble. Save future you from being incredibly busy by getting your users and teaching them how to use the stuff that you build. Focus on that as much as possible. I like to joke with my team that my goal is to automate us out of business. Of course, in reality, you can successfully provision to the rest of your organization, and that's not going to save you time. That's just going to give you more cool opportunities to dig in and work with others, to really expand your portfolio and spread data throughout your organization. We get asked to do some of the coolest analytical projects now that simply would not have existed without these data literacy initiatives. People won't think to bring a cool research question to you. People won't think to find something novel and new in the data that you're providing unless you get them to a good data literacy baseline and really teach them how to dive in and interact with the data that you provide. Much of what I touched on here will be explored in more detail by our second and third panels. How do you transform organizational culture and build data literacy? And how do you take steps to build your organization for the future? I am excited to listen and learn from all of the great data management professionals in those areas. There's so many ways to build data literacy. There's so many ways to build innovation into the future of your data program. And sharing best practices and lessons will go a long way. Okay, very quick wrap up before our first panel. If you take nothing else away from my talk, please remember to always keep your end users at front of mind when you think about data management. Put clean, easy to use data in their hands. Meet them where they are and help them increase their data literacy over time. Use your expertise as data management professionals to grow others. Empower people with data and decentralize data by teaching your users how to access and analyze the information that you provide. Data management is not for the data managers. It's about lifting the entire organization. I hope that together we can build a federal data community where JIM is not the official data management system. It won't be easy. I know that we have a long way to go in my organization, but events like this are a nice reminder that we're all in it together. Thank you for your time.
All right, I would like to next welcome to the stage the VP of Aerospike Public Sector, Kung Nguyen. We've got our first panel of the day. So if the panelists would also like to come up here and take a seat, and we'll get started.
Well, good morning, everybody. An unprecedented amount of data is being across a diversity of sources, whether it be satellite, ground stations, IoT sensors, event streams, data warehouses, data lakes, data oceans, right? Social media, mainframes. And right now, if we harness it properly, we can transform government decision-making. Yet significant challenges stand in the way of such a vision, including the need to really organize, to manage, and to extract actionable insights from these large and diverse data sets, especially in real time. Building an interoperable and modern data architecture with an ecosystem of best-in-breed partners can be the key to drive informed, real-time decisions. My name is Kung Nguyen, and I run Aerospike Public Sector. We are a real-time data platform that truly has the lowest latency, highest throughput, where we can transact and process millions of records in sub-millisecond time. We have unlimited scalability going past petabytes of data, and we can do that with 80% less infrastructure. And I'm joined today by a group of industry partners and colleagues in the areas of, number one, data governance, number two, data management, and number three, obviously, advanced analytics there. So I just wanted to introduce my colleagues from Denodo, from Calibra, and from Tableau. Go ahead, Saji. Introduce yourself.
I'm Saji Hussain. I'm a federal, mostly DoD sales engineer at Calibra. Been there for 3.5 years.
Great. Dave?
I'm David Sears, many different titles. I've been with Tableau now for 10 years. Informatica before that, I've been in the business a very long time out there. I support predominantly DoD and the intel communities.
And I'm Kevin Bohan with Denodo. I've been in the integration space for a little too long, perhaps, and work closely with our customers and helping them build their strategy around their data needs.
Great. So let's start the panel here. Saji, as agency data continues to grow at exponential rates, what considerations are you recommending your government customers to really prioritize right now?
Well, I swear I've never met Peter before, the opening speech, but it's right along the lines of what I was thinking yesterday and today, this morning. And it all has to do with data literacy and making things accessible. So when we start compiling information and making it available, we have to, take a Bill Nye the Science Guy approach to data, right? Which is introduce the concepts in a meaningful and compelling way so that people want to dig deeper into what you just provided, right? So I think a lot of times as data nerds, I'm a scientist, right? Like I've got a degree in biology from Mason way back in the old days. And sometimes we get so caught up in the weeds of numbers and charts and graphs and stuff that we forget that there's an audience out there that needs to be interested in what we're doing. And we forget that. So a lot of times we just provide a ton of data and great tools to slice and dice it, like Tableau, and we just simply assume that people are going to know what to do with that. It's all beautiful and great looking, but if there's no rhyme or reason to it, then it becomes difficult to say like all of this effort that you did was meaningful. So if you look at any research paper at PubMed or NIH, what have you, right? That's a scientific method on display where you have an abstract, right? And a summary of findings. And so right there within 2 paragraphs, you'll know whether or not you want to look at the charts. You'll know whether or not you want to look at the raw data, right? It's that sort of like guided process that we need to be thinking about.
Dave, I know you talked about that data literacy yesterday when we spoke. Thoughts about the different considerations that you recommend to government? Dave?
Me? Yeah, when I look at this, I appreciate how fragmented data is in the government space. We're dealing with thousands of systems, and Was it Jim, Peter? Is that who you were talking? Jim? Okay, yeah, I've seen Jim. I've met Jim many a time out there. If I were to ask you, how many times have you tried to access data and found out there's nuances to the data? There's business rules that you didn't know about. You weren't being able to access it. I mean, I'm Tableau. Our systems that I access are called Alpo because we eat our own dog food. All right. But there are fields out there, measures that I'm looking at, and I go, how is that calculated? Where do I discover that? And I find that as we're looking at these systems, these fragmented systems, and we're talking about there's new architectures coming out, the data mesh, data fabric architectures. We did the data warehousing in the past and other pieces, and they're still coming around. But how do I bring data together, bring it to life for people to be able to work with it? It's really challenging. I go out there and I see people living in spreadsheet hell over and over and over again. That the highest level of analysis is a spreadsheet. Why? Because it's on their desktop. That's the tool they have to work with. Are there better ways to look at the data? Sure. But we go back to data literacy, and I'm glad you brought that up. I mean, I think it's kind of ironic. We were talking yesterday and we all brought up data literacy as a key piece. But how many people actually can understand the charts and graphs that you're looking at? Can they interpret that right? One of the things at Tableau that we're have introduced, and it's something that Gartner, if you like Gartner as an analysis group, it's natural language generation. So having basically AI in the background explaining what the charts are, what they do, to understand the concept. You know, if I looked at ROI, it goes up, that's good. If it goes down, that's bad. Well, some people don't know which way charts should be going. What is good? What is bad? How do I help them to understand and be able to use this? That's going to be critical as we go forward. I mean, I love what you said about how do I bring literacy to it? How do I get a culture of people doing this? It's a real challenge out there, but people have to want to use data because we have so much of it that's going forward.
Thank you, David. What about you, Kevin?
Well, I like the way that Peter broke it down earlier into two parts. First part is bringing the information together. You need a way to make it so it's easily accessible. It's easy for someone to find the information, to access the information. Also, the information is often going to be coming from multiple systems. So how do you integrate that information together to make it so it's in a common format that they can use? And that's a key part. The information, given the users a way that they can find that, but also a lot of times we talked about the data literacy. I think the problem often is we're looking at this as though the end users have the problem, that they don't understand the information. And I would suggest that perhaps the problem is we're giving them the information in the wrong format. A consumer of the information should have it in the way that they're used to seeing it. So you can build a semantic layer and you can deliver to the CPAs that are doing the analysis information in one format. But then if you're putting it for someone in the front office, they might want that information in a different format. And that doesn't mean you have to make multiple copies of the information, but you present it to the consumer in a way that they can understand it in the terms that they want to use. They don't necessarily need to figure out the schema and the tags we have within inside of our databases or the data lakes, what those tags mean. What you need to do is present it to them in terms that they understand. And if we lower the bar to make it easier, our goal should be to make it as easy as a toaster, not some sort of, complicated, process. We should be able to make it so that everyone in the organization is empowered to make the data-driven decisions that they're looking to do.
Great. Thank you for that perspective there, Kevin. And so as we talk about a road towards data democratization, where are you seeing some of the biggest, I guess, gaps and challenges right now within a data fabric, a data strategy for our agencies? I'll go to you, Dave.
Yeah. Discoverability is probably one of the biggest things. When you look at systems and you're trying to find, you have people ask, I know I have the data someplace, we're capturing it someplace. Where is that data? I'll give you an example of, and frustration is, do I have access to it? I mean, this goes back to DoD's Voltus premise, and it's iterated a lot of different places out there. But I had one system that asked a simple question in the Army is, where are my assets? Yeah, it's a simple question. I can say that really in a few words out there. Where are my assets? But the reality was they had to find 70 different data sources across DoD, spend the time to get MOUs to get to the data. They didn't necessarily got live access to it. They might have gotten another piece to bring it together. And then to bring that together, because they were all different systems out there, was a transformation. I mean, they've had the Rosetta Stone of how to be able to say, well, this might be in a repair depot. This might be on a military sea lift command ship. It may be on air mobility command. It might be in transit some other place. The question was simple. The answer was, how do I get that data and bring it together and drive that? So, you know, the democratization is about how do I discover it, and then putting it in a way, again, we go back to literacy. We're going to keep going back to this in a lot of ways. It's about, can I understand what you present out there? How many of you have ever looked at a dashboard, a chart or something and go, huh, what the heck are they talking about here? You know, wow. You know, as a person who's done analytics, that's an epic fail right there. If I can't hand it to Saji here and Saji goes, oh yeah, I get it. I get what you're trying to talk about. I failed miserably as I'm not telling people the different pieces of data out there. So, you know, looking at that, I think is going to be critical for us. Is how do I get this data together? How do I collate it? I love the semantic layer. Different personas are going to look at data a different way. Can I drive that? That's going to be important to us as we go forward.
Wow. Yes. And so, Kevin, as you look at connecting to that plethora of data sources out there, right? It could be thousands. And like Dave was saying, within the Army, I think it was more than 300 systems, right? Around logistics and all of that. But so you need to connect to that data. You need to ingest that data. And what are the challenges that you're seeing from providing a semantic layer for the agencies to make sense of that data, consolidate that data for the right decisions as well?
Sure.
Kevin.
So we look at the issue a little bit different than I think a lot of people do. The traditional way of doing integration is ETL. You bring the information together into a central repository, and then it's going to make it easy to analyze the information. The problem with that is we've been trying to do that for over 30 years. We've been doing data warehouses on premise in our data centers for years, and we've yet to achieve that goal. Now, we're all in the process of, or have already succeeded in modernizing the infrastructure, bringing those into the cloud environment, which dealt with a lot of the challenges we had around scaling those environments, around managing the environments on a regular basis, but it didn't do anything to consolidate, didn't make it anything easier for the consumers to get access to the data. What the semantic layer, or what we refer to as data virtualization, does is it allows you to create a logical data access layer, and you don't necessarily have to bring the data in, you don't have to ingest the data, but what you're doing is you're using the metadata about these different sources. And as the user does their query, as the user requests access, in real time, we go out and bring that information back and present it to the user in the format in which they were looking to do. What that does is it significantly simplifies the data preparation, significantly reduces the effort involved in that. It also allows you to make as many of those, what I'll call customized views, and you don't necessarily have to worry about creating additional copies to put them into those formats. You create that virtual view that's going to be used by a particular group of users, and you can create a completely separate virtual view, and you're not making multiple copies of it, so it's easier to manage, takes up less storage, all of that. So this whole logical approach, or adding a logical data access layer on top of all of these physical systems you have, significantly simplifies the process.
Great. Saji, what gaps do you see?
Well, I think it's funny, ironic that the word democracy is used.
Mhm.
And I was just thinking, like, you know, democracy is ineffective. It doesn't work if you can't get people to vote. And so if you take that analogy, and it's not that far of a stretch, right? And I think Google did it best, right? When it comes time for election season, you know, you go to google.com and you just type in, you know, where do I vote? It knows exactly where you are and gives you all of the voting locations nearby, right?
Absolutely.
And that's the whole point of data democracy, is to put that in the hands of the people. And sometimes the people are our colleagues, and fine, you know, you can give them really complex reports, but sometimes the people are our colleagues that are not data scientists. And for those people, they need that sort of Google style approach. Like, yeah, here's your voting center right over here, right? Simple, straightforward, to the point. And so I think that is a key to getting data into the hands of people. It's so depressing when you work 2-3 weeks on a report and only 2 people out of 1,000 people at your company said, hey, good job, or I really appreciate what you did. As you know, that's the kind of world we live in. And I know we all work for companies, but as data scientists, we are still in the business of selling stuff, right? We're selling stuff to our colleagues. We're selling stuff to our coworkers, our fellow scientists for a peer review. And yeah, like I said, there's nothing more depressing than a bad sales pitch that, you know, only a couple of people understood, right? So
Yes.
you got to make it easily accessible, just like your voting location. And, you know, I've been at Calibra for 3.5 years, but, you know, at every company, you want to measure the success of your product by how many people at your customer's location are using it, right? You sell 1,000 licenses for a product XYZ, come back a year later and you look at the metrics and there's only 30 people using your product. That's the exact same amount, right? Like, I did this scientific paper, nobody looked at it, right? I sold 1,000 seats of product XYZ and only 30 people log in. Why is that? You know, so whether you're a product guy like myself or you're a scientist, you got to look at exactly how do I get this information into their hands in an easy to understand way.
If I may add one more
Yes, please, Dave.
comment, thinking about this. Curation of data. What is my trusted source? How do I know it's my trusted source? I mean, this is one of the things that Calibra can do for us. Things that we do within Informatica is being able to certify a data source, so searches come faster. Discoverability of the data. What do we do? I mean, how many of you have all your systems are pristine? Yeah, it's a joke. Sorry, bad joke, but you know, hey, it is. I mean, we all have systems that are 30, 40, 50 years old. I mean, they are out there. Who's going to go back and fix data problems? Right. So I need to have the curation of the data so that the semantic layer is using the right data, though I know I'm getting the right pieces that are out there. That is the other big piece, and that's what the Calibras of the world can do with the discoverability and identifying what fields are and different pieces are. It's about curating what is the right data sources.
That's great, Dave. And so we've got 4 different industry partners here, and obviously we're all focused on growing our own revenue targets, right? But it's really about, and when you look at an overall agency strategy and you're just selling a siloed solution, it doesn't work for our customers. And for me, running aerospace public sector, my number one focus is to really partner with my industry partners, technology alliance partners out there. So to really impact data requirements of all of our agencies. So how are you guys working together right now to orchestrate capabilities and whatnot for the best agency outcomes? Kevin.
So I think you hit it right on the head there with the fact that when you go into an environment, you go into one of the agencies, you guys are going to have dozens, if not hundreds of different systems that you're using. And at Denodo, we work with and provide over 200 connectors to different data sources, but there's certain partners that you have that you work real closely with, and you go above and beyond what you're doing with the traditional integration to provide more detailed integration. And the partners we're working with today are perfect examples of that. So one of the things that we're doing, and I talked about the whole semantic layer, we're providing that logical way to access the data. With the partnership we have with Calibra, what we can do is look at the data governance rules that they have defined within their system and automatically apply that when people are looking to come to the central location to access the information. So it basically makes it so when we have joint customers, the systems are seamlessly interoperating together. Likewise with Tableau, anyone that's coming from any source can come to our system and use SQL to do their different queries, whether using JDBC, ODBC, whatever the connection type they're doing. But what we've done is worked more closely with the Tableau team. And not only is it that they're accessing data from within the layer, but if you're in our tool and you're looking at a particular data source, you say, okay, this is what the information I want to get. You have the option to click a button and automatically the information is launched into a Tableau dashboard where they can then further analyze the data. They can then dig deeper into it using the visualizations that they provide. Oh, sorry. So that you can use the visualizations that are provided in the Tableau. And so it's not only having an open platform, but it's doing that additional integration with the key partners that you're working with to really make it so the agencies don't have to do that work on their own, but basically out of the box, we're working together.
That's great. Dave, what are your thoughts there? How are you truly helping to collaborate with your other technology alliance partners?
Sure. When you look at, I've worked for product companies for 30 plus years. When you look at product companies and how do they decide, how do I work with different entities out there? Well, one of the things is we're looking at macro trends, right? A year ago, how many of you guys had heard of ChatGPT? Yeah, no one pretty much. All of a sudden, or maybe, okay, great. I got one. All right. Thank you very much for that one. But now it's, I mean, I stumble on a rock and there's a note about ChatGPT at my feet, you know, looking at that. And we're all looking at interesting trends of what's going on and trying to stay ahead of that. But the other piece about this is really looking at, to work with our partners here, it's formal partnerships that are being built out there. We look at what our customers out there are doing out there. That could be through a CAB, I'm drawing a blank on the customer advisory board. Thank you. I now remember on that. It's about working with our community, having, like, for instance, at Tableau, we have a community forum in which people vote and put up ideas of what they think the product should do. And we look at them from and use the data. Yes, we do use our data out there to determine what direction our product should go. All right. But you know, when we look at working with partners, and one of the things you should be looking at from a government perspective is, are these people allowing APIs? I don't have unlimited resources of research and development. But if I have built APIs that, you know, for instance, our REST metadata API were accessed by Calibra to be able to interchange and do bi-directional syncing of metadata, the certified databases to data sources to drive descriptions of fields so people have the same common nomenclature on different pieces out there, to be able to understand what the semantic layer is, to be able to talk to that. So if I have a robust API layer, I can actually be able to work with other partners much faster and develop things in a different way.
That's great. And you know, as I talk to my peers in the commercial private world across the globe, it's a different mentality over there. They're just focused on winning a deal, implementing a capability, and that's it. But in the federal space, I see that technology partners truly come together for a single mission, and that is to help our agencies progress in their mission outcomes there. And so, Saji, going back to this whole idea of collaboration, how are you guys collaborating with not only industry partners, but also the SIs out there as well?
Well, I think what drew me to the company was like their openness, right? Like the ability to integrate with pretty much anything. But that's, you know, that the reason I was searching for that was because I've been in the government business my whole life, my whole adult career. My dad's lifelong government employee, retired twice, USDA and DITRA, former Army guy. So I have a special connection with my government colleagues, and there's nothing worse than not being able to work with a technology that's already there. And in fact, a lot of times, even now, somebody buys Calibra, and then it's like, well, we have Tableau. Like, oh, great. So it's not like, strange for us to try to work together. We have to work together, not just for our platform to function properly in our customers' environment, but most importantly, because our customers are humans, they're people, and they made a purchasing decision 8-9 years ago to buy a particular database technology, maybe even way back when, like Informix, you still see that, Sybase, you still see that, DB2, all of these things are there. And the last thing you want to do is make people feel bad about their decision to buy that technology. You have to be open, you have to be able to connect to everything. And there's no, those days of it's our way or the highway, you got to migrate all of your stuff into my system. I mean, those days are long gone, and everybody says that they have an API and they can integrate, et cetera, et cetera. I think it's really important to challenge that and actually see how it's done, what can be done with the APIs, and really have it demonstrated, right, in real life. I think that's the most important part. And so I'm always happy when my customers challenge me and say, show me how you integrate with Tableau. I'm ready to roll. I can do it right now. So I think that's key.
That's great, Taji. So Kevin, with data virtualization, a lot of times when I look at a lot of these solicitations that come out from the government, it's taking old legacy best practices and trying to shove them into a new capability, a new desire, right, for an outcome. But they're not looking at these new innovative capabilities like data virtualization and the benefits that you can provide to an agency. So how are you collaborating with the agencies out there and really sharing this new way of doing things, data virtualization, to really change the game for the agencies? How's that collaboration happening? How are you getting ahead of things and really introducing capabilities before a solicitation comes out?
Sure. So we work closely with the different agencies that it is important for them to understand, because a lot of people don't necessarily understand this whole concept of adding a logical data access layer on top of the physical repositories. And what we do is what we have different workshops we can do with our the different agencies. We do events like this to try to make sure that they understand that there is an additional approach. There's also activities that we do with the analysts. The analysts are now all talking about balancing the combination of connecting to different data sources as well as collecting. This isn't saying that the approaches of a data warehouse is wrong. You should do it in the way we're connecting. What we're saying is this is something that you need to balance between the two. And we do in a number of different things to try to get that whole concept out there so people understand that this is something they need to also include in what they're doing around modernizing their architectures, around building their data strategy. It's a combination of both connecting to the data as well as collecting the data.
So when it comes to introducing innovation, Dave, how are you getting ahead of it right now? What gaps do you see working with agencies around innovation and delivering on this thought leadership? What's the art of the possible and getting that into the executives that you're working with within the government space?
Sure. I can be a little cynical on some aspects. Innovation at times is just the fact that I'm actually using a tool that produces data visualizations out there, vis-a-vis using an Excel spreadsheet or cutting, pasting data into a PowerPoint. How do I, think about how many hours we have in a week that we're spending in meetings, which could be that we're going through PowerPoint after PowerPoint describing a project. Maybe it's a PMO type of a dashboard, and wherein my executives' times, my people's time is very valuable. What if I just highlighted that these are the projects that are over 10% behind schedule? I want to focus on those ones. I want to focus on the ones that are over budget. Which one are at a burn rate that's going to be destroying me and I'm going to have to put more money onto it. The vast majority of programs are in good shape, but I got to focus on that. So, you know, sure, I bring in a lot of innovation, as Kevin said here, the points of, you know, events, going to trade shows, being thought leadership, of working with people to talk about different things, but consuming it, raising that value out there is, you know, partly through analysts, it's partly through us going out in events and talking and showing some different things. I mean, heck, I remember when I first started Tableau, I'd go to a trade show and people go, "What's a Tableau?" Well, it's Tableau and we do this. Oh, and then, you know, 4 years later, we had a whole different story going on because people started understanding the importance of how data visualization works and the different pieces of that. So as we run through this, it is about education and raising it. And I'll go back to a point you were making, Kung, about RFPs and going data virtualization, something new. I mean, I see plenty of RFPs. I feel like I'm looking at business intelligence when I was with Cognos back in 1997. Can you build a bursted report? Well, is that the way we're doing everything today? Really, no. I mean, come on, guys, that's 30 years old now at this point in time. Can we up this a little bit to make it, or one line in the RFI, we need to do data analysis. Great, you're building a whole system to capture data. I think you want to analyze that data, not just capture it. I mean, come on, guys, let's put some skin in this game and what we're looking at. So again, this is the challenges that we see from, you know, in our side and different pieces on that.
Sajid?
Yeah, I mean, I think it can't be, I guess, overstated how much education is a huge part of my life. And, you know, meeting everyone out here in the playing field face to face, I think is fantastic. And, you know, my approach, and everybody that I work with, our approach has always been to sort of like meet customers where they are in their particular journey, right? There's some people that are just getting they're on the on-ramp. Some people are still in the city streets. Some people are on the highway. And, you know, from just looking at an RFI, I can tell exactly where they are in their journey, right? I can get an understanding of that. And so, you know, we need to be able to adapt. I mean, innovation is kind of meaningless if you just throw that word out there and all of a sudden, you know, you're one of a bunch of companies that can do millions of records at a time, billions of, you know what I mean? So it has to be meaningful. You kind of have to meet the customer where they are in that journey. And sometimes they're on the on-ramp, and, you know, we have to say like, all right, cool, come on, hold my hand, let's go together. And we can work this out. And so education is a huge part of it. And a lot of times the data journey not always begins with the end in mind. It just begins with, I need to get on the highway and then I'll figure out where I'm going. But I always try to get my customers to kind of come back from that approach and think about, hey, where is the destination? Where do you want to be in 2 years? And, you know, maybe we're a year and a half into it. And, you know, maybe we're a couple of months into it. But the end goal is really important. So, and then we go along with you all the way there. I say we, like the grand we, not just Calibra. I'm just talking about everybody.
I like your comment about it. It's a journey.
Yeah.
End of the day, it's a journey that we take together. Yeah. I mean, I think that when we talked about partnership between, you know, vendors out there, but it really is a partnership with our government customers out there. How can we help? Where can we go? We're looking at trying to do things for the greater good. How does this make our lives for our soldiers, our airmen, you know, our civilian workers better? And can we help drive the mission of the government forward and help them achieve their goals? It is a journey.
Yeah, absolutely. And then so as you look at a single stack solution, working with our integrators, right? How do we partner together to truly have an impact with the SIs? They have the relationship, they own the programs. And so how, Kevin, are you coming with a full stack capability like ours, educating the SI, and then hopefully having that implementation plan, that journey plan as well with that systems integrator? What are you doing with that community?
Sure. The GSIs are a critical part of our go-to-market. We've been working with quite a number of them for years. We have a few of them actually in the room with us today. Basically, they're a critical piece in the equation, and it's with the GSIs. It's not as much of the educating them. They understand much of what we're speaking about. They actually bring us into opportunities because they see the value of what this full stack brings to the table. And with them, I think it's not as much as the education and getting out there as it is in the last response when we're talking about doing the education, because they see the value. We've had successful projects with them, and then we're repeating that in additional opportunities.
Great. Dave, what are your thoughts there working with the SIs?
SIs are kind of the lifeblood of working within the government. They own a lot of the contracts out there. We spend a lot of time cultivating relationships with them to drive the right business out there. I mean, they are also looking at what technologies are the government buying. I mean, this is, I always talked about a three-legged stool. There's the government I have to sell to, the SIs I have to sell to, my own company I have to sell to. If it's not an equilateral triangle, then we're going to be having problems at some point in time, right? Everybody has to win on this one. And so we, as let's say a Tableau gets more and more ingrained in the government, more and more SIs are going, well, there's projects out there. I can make money. I can do things. I mean, I hate to bring up the money word, but that's part of things that drive us out there. But, that's how we're going to work with them. Again, we look for partnerships, deep partnerships that can address the mission as we go forward, working and integrating different stacks together and driving forward as we go forward.
I've always wanted to use the word equilateral in a sentence.
I nailed it.
Haven't done that since geometry class, maybe. Yeah, I mean, listen, it's very much like a marriage type situation, right? Like you propose to your wife, and it's not just her that you're getting married to, it's the rest of her family that you have to work with, right?
Absolutely.
It's a silly analogy, but it's not like you're not just working with like one individual, right? You're working with a whole team of people, and these are people, right? You have to think of it that way. And my end user success is based on my systems integrator or contractor, subcontractor, another person, individual contributor. It doesn't matter. Everybody's success is very tightly linked together. And so I don't approach life in the fashion of how much money can I make? The money that I make is directly impacted by the success that my customers have and the success that my partners have, right? So working with everybody and making them successful ultimately will be, money in my pocket, right? Revenue for the company, growth, et cetera. And when I talk about, creating that report that only 2 people liked, I mean, that's not going to make anybody money. That's not going to make anybody successful, right? So the closer we work with our partners to ensure the success of any project, I think it's critical. Absolutely critical.
Absolutely. So when you think about balancing human and technology resources out there to create efficiency and reduce errors and cost around the data, what are you thinking right now, Dave, in terms of that balance and what's lacking, and how could we do better to help our agency customers?
Well, certainly, when we look at this, and what we've talked about the whole time here is about really in my mind, it's the curation of data. Ultimately, I see so many problems within data that, I can't fix. And the decision is, do I fix it right before I do analysis work? Or how do I get an upstream system to fix their data? Well, usually what ends up happening is they say, well, give me your budget and I'll fix the data for you. I mean, well, that's not going to work. I mean, it's not going to help. But how can we get that? Because, the data is out there. The data can make a difference. It will make a difference in our agencies. It will make a difference in how we run our business, how we are efficient, how we're using our resources more efficiently. But ultimately, it comes back to the data has to support that mission out there. Can I trust that data? Is that data secure? Do I have different personas that I can be able to use using the same way? Do I have to replicate everything and move it over? It's not a great answer. I mean, who wants to spend extra on storage out there? Leave it in situ and let us be able to work with it, federate the data and start working with that and be able to drive that answer. But again, looking at this, I've got to have data that I can trust, that can answer certain questions, and then build on that. We mentioned, as Sajay mentioned before, this is a journey. Analytics is a journey. You answer questions, you think up new questions. You think of new questions after that. You iterate on this and you drive it. Sometimes you're going to work with non-pristine data. You're going to have small victories. You're going to show what you can. Clean the data when you when you redo it or do something with it. You re-swizzle your visualizations and put it back out there. But it's a journey over time. You will build things over time. What you do today might not look anything like what you do a year from now, 2 years from now. But trust the journey. Pick goals that solve the problems over the journey's time frame. That's what I'll be looking at.
Got it. Garbage in, garbage out. What do you think about that, Saji?
That's my phrase. I love saying garbage in, garbage out. Yeah, this is just like this is what we do. We're all artists, right? And it's we put information together from multiple sources. And if you just think about like a painter and how many different things that you have to put together to make something visually compelling, you know, that's what we do, right? And so we have to stop thinking about spreadsheets and numbers and data and size and records and columns, and we have to start thinking from an artist perspective. And there's going to be revolutionary changes. I, for one, welcome my new AI overlords when they show up. I'm on your side. These things are going to change overnight, and you have to be able to adapt to those changes. And you know, as an artist, those changes are just yet another thing that you can go and buy at Michael's, right? It's like AI is just yet another thing, right? Machine learning is yet another tool, is yet another thing. And so you have to be flexible enough to accommodate and adapt to that reality. So yeah, garbage in, garbage out. These tools are there, but they're just tools, right?
And they're just tools.
They're just tools.
Going back to that the human aspect of everything, how do you bridge that gap here, Kevin?
Well, I think there's a number of different things, and we've talked about the whole data literacy, but I couldn't agree more on the data quality. If you don't have the quality data, then it's a problem. But there's also another aspect to not only have the flexibility around being able to get access to clean data or to fix and cleanse the data as part of the process, but also making sure that you're flexible and able to add new data sources. The environment's constantly changing. The point was made, of a few different technologies just weren't around 12 months ago. You need to architect your infrastructure to be able to change to be able to add new data sources, but also new tools that the end users are going to use and be flexible enough to support if the user wants to start using a new tool or whatever the change in the environment is. So you have to architect it such that you're future-proofing and you're making it flexible. You're not necessarily tied in to the underlying infrastructure locking in or affecting what those users are doing. So the design should be such that any change that you're doing around the architecture doesn't necessarily impact the consumers and vice versa. If the consumers are changing, it shouldn't require changes to the underlying infrastructure.
Got it. Absolutely. And then going back, I'd like to end with that whole area around data literacy. And I thank you for the keynote speaker talking about that. And we were talking about data literacy yesterday. Dave, What are the challenges there and where can we improve around the literacy with our agencies?
I think the first thing we have to look at is the people within our agencies. I love what Peter said about, we have, user groups that come in, bring people in, get them curious, have them show success, have people describe their successes different places out there. But let's take a look at our user base. I have on one side data scientists. They're jacking Python code, R code. They talk in a different language than 99% of the people out there. They provide very valuable pieces. But how do I operationalize what they're doing vis-a-vis working with Rose and Sam Paluta from Stamford, Connecticut, who all they want to do is, where's that dashboard again? Let me push the button up here and there's something happened out there. All right, so I've got this wide range of people out there that I have to satisfy from a data literacy perspective, and you have to meet them where they are. Some people only are going to consume reports that are out there, right? You build something, they'll look at it. That's all they want to do. They're never going to be curious about data. Then you have other people who are going to have different levels of curiosity, and you're going to go up to the data scientist out there. I have to be able to satisfy all the different people out there. I have to be able to operationalize the AI ML that's coming out here. I mean, this is some really, think about the mound we talked at the beginning, mounds and mounds of data. I don't have enough humans to go through all the data. I'm in the Intel world, I'm looking at images. We get billions of images out there. How can I strip it down to say, are there cars in this image? Without having an analyst look 5 minutes at a picture and figure out if there's cars in there. How do I make it faster for them? So I have to be able to include this. So when you look at analytics, when you look at advanced analytics, you're looking at a wide range of people out there. And this goes back to democratization of data and democratization of pieces out there. Can I satisfy different parts of pieces out there for each of the different groups out there? So I have to work with that. I have to be, again, I like user groups. I like meetings. I like people to describe what they're doing, have other people have success in your agency. I built this. They take pride in it. And then people go, well, that's pretty cool. How'd you do that? Now I've changed the metric of understanding and getting excited about data and what it can do for me and how it can drive different pieces out there. That's what gets me excited in the morning is looking at how can I make a difference on this stuff? How can I be clever with my data? So I'll leave it at that.
Thank you, Dave. And thank you to my panelists here, Saji, Dave, Kevin, and thank you for your audience participation and focus here. But I believe that everyone has a better understanding of how technology partners right now are working together to really improve connecting to real-time data, processing that data, and then truly sharing that data, having that data interoperability, and moving towards data stewardship and governance for all of our agencies. So thank you, everybody, for your time.
All right, we're going to go ahead and take about a 30-minute break. So just make sure that you end up back here at 9:45. So thank you all. All right, thanks everyone. Welcome back from our break. We are going to get started with our second panel of the day, moderated by Jesse Burr from NextGov. Jesse, come on up.
All right, thank you so much, Kirsten. Like she said, my name is Jesse Burr. I'm the managing editor at NextGov, and I'm very pleased to have our panel of guests here today. Among them is Melvin Brown II, the Deputy Chief Information Officer in the Office of the Chief Information Officer at the U.S. Office of Personnel Management. We've got Dr. Clark Cully, Acting Chief Data Officer, Duty Deputy Chief Data Officer at the Department of Defense. Jacob Smith, Data Scientist and Office of Policy and Legislation in the Criminal Division of the Department of Justice. And Sunil Madhuguri, Chief Technology Officer in the Office of Information Technology at the U.S. Customs and Border Protection. All right, guys, thank you so much for joining me. And do we have Jacob with us, just to make sure?
I'm here.
Okay.
Can you hear me?
I will have us talk with our in-person panelists while we make sure we've got Jacob online. So the first thing I wanted to ask is, tell us a little bit about some of the data-centric work that you guys do specifically in your day-to-day jobs.
Good morning. Thanks for having me. So currently I'm the Chief Technology Officer. 2 weeks ago, I also had two hats. Also, I was the acting Chief Data Officer. So we did hire a full-time CDO now, so we can sleep at night. So she's an awesome CDO. She couldn't be here today, but we are very excited to have her. So CVP, as you can imagine, we're in the news all the time for various reasons. And we are very data-centric agency. And I myself, my background, I come from the tech industry myself. I've been in the government for 4 years. The mission is super exciting as to what we do. I think there's nothing more important than keeping the country safe and our borders safe on a daily basis. And we facilitate legal travel and legal trade every day within the United States. So we have 65,000 people, agencies, government employees, plus contractors. And the interesting part is, especially on the side, we are very centralized. It's run by one part of CBP, and then we work with all of our partners. We call them our trusted partners. Those are the uniformed officers you see in the airports or on the border or everything else, which the three color uniforms, blue, green, and khaki, the three colors you see. And plus the Office of Trade and the other components also we work with. You may know we are responsible for about, last year we collected about $105 billion of tariffs on trade. So US economy is about what, $22 trillion or so change. And I think we imported about $6 trillion worth of goods into the US. So impact is enormous of what we do, especially on the data side. And so as CVP grew out of after 9/11 when we started, right? One thing mattered, just get quick answers, get it done quickly. Doesn't matter about the money. Money was not an issue those days. Not anymore, right? Now we're begging for money every day. So because of that, we had some of the issues we've been talking about right now today itself, right? Some of the siloed data environments, some of the data different format where it goes to sides from mainframe onwards to open systems across the board is we have things sprawling all over the place. But what we have done is, what we're trying to do is moving forward, we have two components I would say we are working on. One is our IT technology. Since we manage that, we're custodians of the data for our operators, which I just mentioned earlier. So we're trying to figure out what makes sense there. So we have a full-time CDO reporting into the CTO office now. So we are combining all those forces together to see how we can formulate a data strategy which is more uniform across the whole agency, especially on the IT side. That's one component. The second component, which is I'm heavily involved with personally myself, is the operation technology, we call it, which is our border and our edges. We call it the edge computing. As you know, 75% of all the growth these days in the data is on the edge computing. That's where we are. So think a US border is edge everywhere across the board, southern border, northern border, and both the coasts, right? So that's what we manage. Besides that, we also manage other countries. I hope you have global entry. Thank you for your business if you have global entry. And so we also have remote stations or remote airports where you fly out of. So we manage those also, right? So because of that, this marriage between OT and IT is a new frontier for us, I would say. And lot of challenges, exciting stuff. Image processing, edge computing, what the AI machine learning looks like for that. I have different definition of AI ML. I'll talk a little bit further later, but that's where we are from the data perspective. It's remember one different thing for us for CVP is 24/7 real time now. There's no waiting. The airport, if you see the airport lines growing, we're in the news. So that's the big difference for us.
So good morning, Melvin Brown, Deputy CIO at the Office of Personnel Management, the largest employer in the United States. We employ about 8 million people. We support a workforce of about 8 million, including our retirees and federal employees. So in the CIO's office, our chief data officer sits outside of the CIO's shop. So we've got a data organization. Our CDO Tech Cal is in charge of that. And so our job is really to provide the plumbing for the water. And so data is the water for us. It is the flow of the information that we help to support. And so our challenges or the things that we've been undertaking is empowering the user to create the intelligence around the data that they need. And so we've done that by, using Power BI across the enterprise and allowing the end users to create the dashboards and the intelligence that they need to make decisions. That's helped us a lot. And it's given us the ability to kind of identify who the true data owners are and showcasing that data in a way to where they want to share that data that we have. We've got a data governance council that has started to look at all of the data that HR collects. And now we're starting to share that with agencies through our dashboard capabilities. And the aha moment, if you will, has been agencies coming back going, we didn't know that you had all that. And now that you have it, we'd like to get access to it to inform decisions. And so from an HR perspective, looking at our demographics, looking at our hiring, looking at our time to hire, where's our workforce so we can start to do workforce planning. What does our age of our workforce look like? How many people do we have certified and trained, and where are their skill gaps? That's all of the data that we start to need now, especially considering in IT that less than around 3% of the workforce is what we consider to be the Gen Zs. So we've got a small component of our federal workforce that are much younger and not very well represented. So we're starting to look at that data and try to figure out, what do we need to do to bring in more early career talent? And so those are some of the challenges that we're facing right now, but our ability to empower the end user to create the data analytics that they need has been monumental for us.
Thanks. From the Department of Defense, we've been making a significant and growing investment in data management over the last several years, creating a chief data office, separating that chief data office from the CIO, creating a data strategy. Now we're moving towards the integration of our data activities with those for advanced analytics and AI. So we formed a new CDAO organization, bringing together a range of digital and artificial intelligence capabilities with a strong data foundation. Now, the progress in data maturity for us has been initially focused on making our data visible. We've got more than 6,000 IT systems of record across a very large and complex globally distributed organization, just illuminating all those different data sources. Then once that data is visible, these catalogs are structured and connected together, doing the work to ingest those into data aggregation and management platforms where you can make sense of that data. So getting the APIs in place to pull in authoritative data needed by the broader enterprise from what were a variety of legacy stovepipes has been an important second step. The third step is investing in making data understandable, the labeling of data, the ontologies by which we structure that information, the way that information is curated as a product for a variety of applications, many of which are very different than maybe what that system was initially created for. We know if we want to do advanced analytics, ML and AI in some use cases, that we have to have a strong foundation of structured data and making sure that it's fit for a variety of purposes and not its original purpose exclusively. And that has been keeping us busy, but we know that's the seed corn for the places that we need to go for the AI enabled capabilities of the future. And for us, it's around the growth towards decisions at all levels being informed by the best data and analytics available. And it's been fairly straightforward to do that for enterprise and boardroom financial type decisions, but moving towards data-driven operational decision-making for the warfighter in the field and for commanders to make decisions in near real time using much more complex and dynamic information. That's the challenge. So we're trying to move from the boardroom to the battlefield in the way that quality data can impact and improve the performance of our operations.
And Jacob, what's some of the database work that you guys have been working on?
Hey there. Hopefully you can hear me now.
We got you.
Great. So I'm a data scientist with an office, a policy office within the DOJ criminal division. So I'm not speaking as a CDO or a CTO, but somebody more kind of on the front lines, doing a lot of analytics day to day. So my office does a smattering of stuff. Part of it is policy oriented. So we're a policy office. So we're advising DOJ leadership on things like violent crime trends, using data, using predominantly public data to reduce the lag time that we're seeing when analyzing violent crime trends, so that we don't have to wait 6 months or a year to figure out what's going on with some of these trends, but reduce the lag time to a couple weeks, things like that. Another branch of our work is supporting the litigators across the division, helping them find new ways to incorporate data to do their jobs better, differently, in novel ways. So whether that's bringing in new data sets that they've never used before, attorneys who have predominantly spent their careers pursuing cases in a kind of textbook way, whether that's just finding new ways, finding new tools that they can use and helping them kind of get those off the ground. So it's kind of a variety of things, and we use a variety of tools from low code, no code stuff like Power BI, ArcGIS Pro, to much more coding intensive things like R and Stata. So we're kind of running the gamut in terms of the tools that we use, and we work very collaboratively across the division, across the department. So our purview really requires a pretty holistic view of what's going on across the department, both in terms of who's doing what and the back end, right? Architecturally thinking through the structure, because when we're working together on these, on a dashboard or something, we need to know what's going to live where, who's going to own it, all these things. So I guess in some ways we're kind of a microcosm of, I would say, the full DOJ strategy, data strategy. We're trying new things and trying to push towards new solutions. And we're invested in making sure that not only data capability is continuing to grow, right? In the sense that just are we using our various components across the division, across the department, using data at all to do their jobs. But I think our team is very invested in driving towards good analytics, and not just making the graph, but making sure that our audiences, who are predominantly attorneys, have the tools they need to make sense of their analytics in the right way, not just having the data, which we all know is only half the battle.
And I think each of you kind of touched on the people question, and in particular, users that are not inherently technology pros. And I wonder, what are some of the biggest cultural and people challenges that you're encountering? And also, what are some of the most helpful solutions that you guys have employed?
Yeah, I'll take that one. So from a cultural perspective, and thank you for that question, what we found is there are shadow developers and shadow IT people within every line of business. And so the more we push out the technology to the endpoints, to the end user, we discover where those resources and assets are. And so these are the people that are trusted within those lines of business that are not necessarily in IT. And so they're building out those solutions, thus helping us to further the sharing of data in a way that's been real helpful. And then the other thing that we've done inside the CIO shop is we've made sure that we've offered training for everybody, such that whenever we roll out a technology, we make sure that we offer training for them to be able to use it. And we've seen greater adoption of the technology by doing it that way. And we're starting to build more solutions, because all the solutions will never be built by the CIO's office. That's just a truth. Once we put more tools in the hands of the end users, they will help us to modernize and build out more of the organization than the CIO's office can ever do.
For the Department of Defense, I would just say that, changing culture starts with the top, and you have to really value these skills in your workforce in order to appropriately prioritize what it takes to get this type of competitive talent. So in addition to just broader data literacy and acumen campaigns to create appetite, because even if a user doesn't need to customize software or interact extensively, you want them to be excited about the power of data to help them make decisions, that they see it as a management tool for better seeing and managing risk for whatever level of decision that they're making. But to envision that, it takes leaders at the top who are actively using these types of tools for their decision making. And so we've been fortunate that our deputy secretary really has prioritized this, and that has helped to bring along a focus on the right type of digital expertise. And for those who are the developers and practitioners and scientists and analysts using data capabilities across the workforce, often they're in small groups distributed across the force. And it's important to connect those different pockets of excellence together into a broader ecosystem. And so we know we need investment in the collaboration tools so that data scientists in one service can talk and engage with data scientists in another service. And there are ways for them to have portable code and applications across the different organizational stovepipes. And so breaking down barriers to collaboration among these high demand but low density skilled assets across our workforce is important to really reaching the next level.
Yeah, and I would say sort of similarly, building the bridge between the high level strategy that's written out on paper that the data teams are thinking about and the actual products, which I think in many cases can be difficult for leadership to see, right? What are we talking about? And so I think something we've really focused on as analysts is making that connection with the practical work that can actually support our leadership's goals. And it's as I mentioned, our leadership at DOJ are all attorneys, so they really need to see the strategy in action to get a sense of how it can make a difference. And once we kind of are able to do that, it's a chicken and egg thing, right? Because the strategy is dictating how we do our work, but then the work itself is kind of iteratively shaping the strategy and getting the buy-in from leadership in that process is obviously very critical. And I think having those deliverables, having those products to show them really just greases the wheels there.
Yeah, so I think everybody right on. Just a quick comment from CBP perspective. We are the largest law enforcement agency within the U.S. So because of that, so our clientele, I would say, our partners are, they're the folks, the agents and officers in the front lines who you see. They're getting shot at, every conceivable thing you can think about, they're going through. So for them, we have to, technology, it doesn't make sense talking technology, right? We're talking about as to how are we going to help them. I was at the Southwest border a few weeks back. One of the agents, I asked a young gentleman, phenomenal, and asked him, what exactly do you want? He had a simple request, just make my radio work during emergency. So it just tells you, right, different perspective of things, right? So we don't, one thing I've told my team, we're not going there and start talking to them about technologies, and because they don't have the time, right? We mentioned about shadow IT. So we are changing there. The edge computing I mentioned earlier is changing the whole paradigm there. So what we are doing is we are trying to see, we are taking some agents and officers who are interested to go a little bit deeper understanding for the other teammates and bringing them on board to show them what, as to what we can do. I'll give an example. Robotic process automation is one area where they had no idea, right? We didn't talk about RP. We just said, hey, you're doing this process manually. So we get some feed from a plane, from a flying object, and they ingest that into a spreadsheet, and then they copy and paste the spreadsheet into something else. It's 10 hours of that work. Can you imagine doing this on a daily basis? It's not easy. So what we did was we wrote a small bot for them and showed them, hey, this is what we can do for you. right? So that really helped. So what we are doing is there are folks who actually want to learn that now. So we calling teaching them how to fish. That's the concept where they're small wins, it really helps. But one thing we do not try and do there, especially in the field, is grow on top technology. Absolutely not. That's our job to make sure to give them tools to make their life easy, but not top technology. That makes sense.
And I think on that note, how do you guys take data from something that the government just has a lot of, just like a thing, and turn it into a usable asset for your agency? And does that more involve technological tools to get there, or is it a process and a system approach?
Well, I'll say that it's been both. And one of the approaches that our CDO took was one, identifying the data that we had from an HR perspective, and it was massive. And then, creating dashboards and visualizations, and then giving that access to other agencies so that they can see what their workforce looks like, so that they can do workforce planning and strategy. And so now we've got a data governance council. And so now the council starts to look at, are these the right sources of data? How do we make sense of the data? Making sure that the data is clean and been curated in the right way, and then providing the right level of access to the people that need to have it to make decisions. And so that's been extremely helpful, having that data governance council, and then just identifying what are the data elements that the HR professionals need in order to make strategic decisions and plan new workforce planning going forward.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I would say we're very similar for us. As also for us, just the size who we are, and the data bring a sprawl everywhere. First thing what we have done is under the new CDO and the CTO office is that trying to figure out what exactly we have. And I think that itself is a challenge. I can tell you that. Like you mentioned about shadow IT, there is data all over the place, which probably doesn't belong there, should be in a secure environment, right? You bring that part of the trust as part of the zero trust, to bring that devices within the zero trust architecture, bring those in. But what we created, we created a data working group across all of CVP. This is a very well attended group. We meet like once a month, and the discussion is some of these topics: data, who has what, who can see what, who gets access to what, and then also how do we modernize some of the architectures already in place, right? So we are the technology folks, so we kind of give ideas to them as to what we can do. But as I said, the data belongs to all of our operators. They own the data. We're just the custodians, keeping it safe, make it scale, that kind of stuff. Other thing what we are doing is we have seen the benefits of going to the cloud. We are one of the very early cloud adopters. 6-7 years ago, we have been in cloud for a while. 70% of all workload is already in the cloud. Thing where we are struggling right now in the data perspective, we call the high value assets. There are 16 high value assets with the White House monitors. Think about the trade, United States trade, passenger systems coming in the United States. These are high value assets, gets monitored by the White House. That's what the challenge of. These are massive data stores. How do we take this and move into something? So we are trying to figure out. People mentioned something about how do we modernize some of the data backend. That's what we're working on. These buzzwords of data mesh and data architectures, all those things we have. But it's a practical way of doing things. There are certain things we have done. Definitely, we have done a phenomenal job, in my opinion, especially on the application side. It's all containerized application. We are seeing the benefits of the cloud. If you get a chance, please, I was talking earlier, the application of CBP1 is a mobile application, which is currently being used in the southwest border to help asylum seekers. It's come out of my shop, and I'm in the news every day because of that. Senate hearing was there 2 days back. We were on CNN 2 days back. I mean, it's crazy right now. The reason I'm mentioning this is what we deal with on a daily basis. So mission application 24/7, plus how do you modernize also in the meantime, not affecting the mission, is our challenges. So we have a great bunch of team members, and from industry perspective, that's where we need help. So that makes sense.
So if I could add to that
Mhm.
just before we pass, the other key thing that we did was we created a learning agenda. And with that learning agenda, the question was, what information do we want to learn? And so what data do we need? So that helped us to identify, what data do we need to curate and what data do we need to make decisions? So, okay.
Yeah, and another piece of this is at the DOJ, especially, it's a lot of our data is not ours per se. It's public data that we are trying to pull in, which brings its own set of challenges, right? So for our violent crime work, we pull in through APIs and some, Sunil mentioned RPA, using RPA for kind of essentially web scraping. We're pulling data from hundreds and hundreds of police departments and just figuring out how that's going to all come together and where it's going to live and how it exists as kind of public data that we're re-aggregating in this way and manipulating who's going to own it, who's going to pay for it, all these pieces. Is something that we're kind of having to figure out on the fly. We do, of course, have a DOJ strategy and all of that, but it just kind of figuring out those details is a piece that I think gets overlooked sometimes. That it's not just the data you have, but the data everybody else has, and how do you bring that into the fold?
And I would say, again, prioritization is key. Thousands of systems and use cases, good Pareto analysis shows that, maybe just as little as 10% of those data sources are really the most in-demand enterprise assets. And we do want to stem the bleeding. And so we have this philosophy of while we're working on legacy systems, let's make sure we've got mechanisms in place to ensure no new bad systems are procured in the future. So getting the contracting and procurement language right to make new investments forward compatible and interoperable and compliant. That's key to bound the problem. And then, working with the mission owners and senior leaders to say, what are the key decisions that you're trying to make and how can we bring the most impactful insights to bear, and really making sure that there's an empowered and motivated customer there to help do the hard work and get the data engineering done, even if it's, intensive cleanup in some cases. And then once you have that ecosystem of, in our case, several hundred authoritative data sources together, you start to realize the power of insights that come from this ensemble of key cleaned sources across people, things, money, operations, logistics, et cetera. And that helps you then see what the next step is. Once you kind of get started, have a few minimum viable products in place, you can often see some efficient next steps that you can take to build from there.
And so data and data management have been a point of conversation in the technology space for quite a while. But I noted that several of your offices have made formal steps to tie data and data management to these quote unquote new and exciting technologies like artificial intelligence. And so I wonder if any of you guys can talk about what it means to have those formal associations and why data is important to these advanced technologies.
Sure, I can go fast. So from CTO office, we have divided my shop in few areas. We have, I mentioned app development is one of them. The second area we have is called IT MARD, where we work with our, I would say within OIT itself, our partners, as to how do we modernize some of these systems, especially in next generation technologies. Third area is emerging technologies. We are doing some pretty interesting work there, from metaverse to digital twins, to some of the other technologies, drone technologies. How do we take advantage of those? But the last area here is data. So from data perspective, we have created what is called an AI ML Center of Innovation, COI. We call it. It started about 3 years back. It's fairly mature. So what we are doing is we're going across the whole agency and talking to folks with the data working group I mentioned to see what kind of synergies and common collaboration we can do across the board. Because as I mentioned, the operation technology components, from drone onwards to drones to sensors, IoT devices, cameras, all those components, right, as part of the edge, we had to work with them. Because earlier those are siloed systems. Now they connect to the network. To the network is maintained by our Office of Information Technology. So because of that, we have come out with a model where we are intaking projects. We have about 45 to 50 active AI models. And also, by the way, in my definition, AI ML is a little bit different. I call it ML is model learning, because that's what you're teaching the model over and over again as what to do. And AI, in my definition, is a lot of people call artificial intelligence. I call it actionable intelligence, right? Because at the end of the day, you're training a model, and then you're getting some action out of that, right? So that's my definition of where things are. Because AI model is the most overused word in the industry, in my opinion, right? It means, I'll be honest with you, me personally, doesn't mean anything. We need to show as to how we're going to help certain things from data perspective. So I'll give another example, data tagging, data annotation, right? Especially, we have a project we're working on called non-intrusive inspection. So the trucks coming in the United States, especially Brownsville, Texas, and other ports, what is happening is about 40 to 50% of those trucks coming in are empty trucks, presumably. But again, we can't assume that they're all empties. We have to make sure we scan it correctly and make sure there's nothing nefarious is in those trucks, right? But if we can come out with some kind of modeling or system where we can actually detect and see, hey, this is good to go. The officer, he or she can do something else, and no, human overrides everything end of the day, right? So 50% trucks, can you imagine how much faster the trade is going to help, the impact of trade, what we just talked about? So we are working those kind of things. So right now there's an RFP out for this. It's called the non-intrusive inspection. You should check it out. There's a pre-draft out for the RFP, and the work is pretty much we are telling people that they need to come out with modelings based on some of the images we are providing to the industry. There are a million images of trucks in various formats, and there are some anomalies also built within those images. And we're looking at data tagging, data annotation, those kind of things is what we're looking for. So this is a real-time stuff we're working on, the real impact on the industry, real impact on a US economy, right? So for us, the new way of doing things, technology-wise, is where we are spending a lot of time. As I'm spending a lot of time on. And so if you could think about from your perspective, industry perspective, think about all the end-to-end points, what we need to look at, right? So we are open, and if you have any ideas, please do talk to us.
So the connection between data and AI is so critical that we merged our data office and our AI organization together into a digital and artificial intelligence office. And there's manifold reasons for that. One is, as stewards of taxpayers' dollars in a large, complex business enterprise, we just want to make sure that we're managing efficiently. And industry has shown, there's a variety of tools to better manage our talent, better manage our resources, our contracts, our facilities using these tools. Second, as an element in the intelligence and national security community, we have to look over the horizon to what's going on in the world, and doing that analysis with the vast amounts of open source and classified information, and pulling very subtle signals out of a very noisy background really is a machine learning problem. We also do a vast amount of globally distributed real-time operations, and we know that in particular use cases, there's a real decision advantage that comes with speed. And whether that's in a military conflict or in other types of operations, sometimes being first matters to mission outcome. And thus, we want to make sure we're harnessing state-of-the-art capabilities to provide our military members with whatever edge and advantage we can provide. And in general, that leaders are making decisions with the best available information, and shame on us if we knew something, but the person responsible for acting on that information didn't have it readily available to them. So, it's our mission imperative to make sure that we provide decision advantage using data and AI enabled capabilities to the warfighter.
We similarly have an AI community of innovation at DOJ that is, certainly the Venn diagram of that that group and the general data COI is there's a lot of overlap, but they're fairly distinct, mostly because just the AI COI and the folks working on AI. I think a lot of the focus is making sure that we're taking advantage of the potential and the capability to separate that noise from the signal to the extent possible, while making sure that we understand what's going on beneath the hood and that we feel confident about it before we deploy it to our attorneys, to our investigative partners who aren't going to have that same sense. So there's really, I think, a focus right now on making sure we understand how the sausage gets made and that we feel good about whatever tools being considered before we were to deploy it more widely. Because no matter how sleek or exciting it might be, right, if we can't have some amount of confidence in the conclusions, then it's not it's not going to do much for us. So I think it's very much trying to balance those two things. And that said, we're certainly no strangers to it. And we're certainly embracing a lot of these tools. A huge amount of the work that's going on the investigative prosecutorial side is just scouring through huge amounts of documents, and something like that, which AI or whatever you want to call it has been able to do and to assist with, to augment for a long time. And we're starting to embrace that, but just making sure that we kind of stay on the vanguard in a way that we feel good and we feel is reliable is kind of where we're at right now.
Mm-hmm.
So from our perspective, AI has played a big role in our cyber posture. And so what I mean by that is if you've read the new executive order about us moving all of our instances to the cloud and leveraging cloud cyber technologies in order to, protect our high value assets. And so one of the things that, like I said, we are a Microsoft shop. And so the Azure cloud has been, our mainstay for that. But our ability to use Defender and to be able to ingest those logs and to do artificial intelligence around logs to just track improbable things that can't happen, like two people logging in from the same person logging in from two different locations. Well, that's a flag. And so now that artificial intelligence prints that out to us and say, hey, let's flag that account. Let's suspend that account until we do further investigation. Well, that allows our analysts to do more high value asset work in analyzing the actual anomalies than they have to do going through all of the logs. And so we've taken a slightly different approach to AI and using it to help strengthen our cyber posture going forward. So making sure that the data that's being ingested is accurate is extremely important to us from a cyber perspective.
And to follow up on that, how much more, I guess, useful does a technology like artificial intelligence make your event log data?
It's important for the algorithms to be right, and for the scenarios for which we configure that to be right. So the things that we're looking for, the vulnerabilities and things that we're looking for, it's important that we configure that correctly, so that we don't come up with a false positive going forward. Mm-hmm. So that's extremely important.
And in a similar vein, I think each of your agencies touches on some very personal and secure information that you want to maintain. So what are some of the most important privacy considerations that you guys are working with, particularly not just in the data that you have itself, but in transit, how you're using it, how you're letting other people use it, et cetera?
I'll defer to the law enforcement community first.
Yeah, so privacy, of course, it's foremost. I would say one of the not challenges, but I would say one of the areas where we spend a lot of time on. Because data sharing, so if there are 5 FOIA requests we get, I'm sure DOJ knows about this. We do get a lot of FOIA requests, and we have ways to answer that. But from data privacy perspective, we mentioned about the CV1 application, right? We have a very stringent policy because of about who we deal with, from all the way from personal information to passport information to other biographic information. If you come in and out of the airport in the US, going overseas, you go through a scanner, right? You just put your face in front. This goes to biometric information, but US citizens, there are different laws, of course, for certain reasons and non-US citizens, there are different laws and rules in place because of that. So what we have done is everything what we have, any new project, any new technology, cloud, no cloud, it doesn't matter. Privacy plays a major role for us, right? And how do we share data? Other agencies also is becoming more and more prevalent now because of data sharing, right? So our sister agencies, you can think about ICE and within DHS, ICE and USCIS, we do a lot of sharing of information, right? The alien number, we call it, alien number comes from USCIS, which we incorporate, which is also a PII, right? You can find a bunch of information. So how do we secure that and make sure, that's taken care of? So we have a full-fledged privacy office, and also we have a lot of lawyers like DOJ has. So we do deal with that. Now, all rightly so. I don't want to do something and be in the wrong spot, the wrong place. So we are very concerned about that. The thing which we are finding interesting more and more is the MOUs and ISAs we have for sharing data. So in our case, I'm sure same thing applies to DoD, is sharing data with not only locally within DHS and our external other agencies, federal agencies, is also the international partners. I was in Singapore about a few months back. I was talking on a panel there on trade, and they wanted to work right away. So privacy laws are very different there compared to us. Saying so for them, hey, come on, what are you talking about? We don't do any checks. Just put it across, right? Not for us, right? So we have to make sure our laws are followed correctly. So what I told my team is we have tons of MOUs and ISAs across the whole agency. The CDO office, what they're going to do, which is part of CTO office, we are putting the cataloging everything what we have, what the ISAs and MOUs look like, and based on that, then we can decide what makes and what doesn't make sense in a secure way as to what we can share. But it's privacy. I'll make sure publicly. I'll make sure I say this. It's the number one thing for us. Making sure data, keeping it safe, for law enforcement is number one for us.
And so for us at HR, well, I don't need to tell you that we have to take privacy very seriously. We've had a history of something going wrong, and so we do a privacy impact assessment whenever we roll out a new system, and then we do a privacy threat assessment also. And then we've implemented, as has most agencies, the ability to make sure that the right people have access to the right information at the right time. And so, our ability to encrypt information in transit and at rest are things that we're working on to protect people's privacy, in addition to, our zero trust architecture, where, the foundation of that is based on our ICAM strategy, which is around credentialing and asset management. Is kind of how we continue to do that, to make sure that the right people have the right information and the right access levels, such that if things happen, you don't have to worry about the wrong people getting that level of access.
Fortunately, most of our data is focused on foreign persons, and that helps us clarify our thinking. But as we, procure commercially available information or use open source information, having appropriate checks in place to look at considerations related to any U.S. person data that might be picked up as part of that. We also have a privacy and civil liberties office that's helping create the governance processes to structure our thinking, because new technologies allow the fusion of new types of information together and raise new quandaries, and values are in tension, and we have to have that dialogue in a transparent way. So for example, as we have information on US service members that we could connect together to try and understand mental health concerns, for example, like that raises a lot of competing values, and we have to be continuously in dialogue about finding the right balance. And insider threat monitoring or other kinds of things raise those types of values and tension. And I think making sure all the stakeholders are part of that conversation, and that it's structured, and that you do that as early in the solution development as you can, is key to avoiding unintended errors on those types of applications.
Unsurprisingly, at the DOJ, we have no shortage of lawyers who are able to tell us when we're going to go in the wrong direction in the privacy area, which is helpful. So, I mean, I think largely what everyone else said, we have our privacy officials who are able to weigh in, and it really comes into play most when it's interagency sharing. And I think it's all the best practices that have been mentioned, and just thinking carefully about what needs shared and what doesn't. But another solution that we often find is, can we create a separate cut of a certain data set that removes most of the PII or all of the PII, which can just alleviate a lot of these issues. So you can avoid these complicated conversations and simplify the MOUs, and that can really just facilitate that kind of data sharing when it needs to happen quickly, we found.
And I think considering just the sheer volume of sensitive information that the government collects, and as you guys said, the MOUs, the foreign governments, all the different partners you guys have to work with, do you guys think that the US government is capable of being a leader in what data privacy should look like?
Yeah, yes, absolutely. I mean, thing is, because of the laws entails that, right? As to what that, especially for a being law enforcement agency, I can give you an example. When we had some of the issues with some of the riots and other things like that. So our being a federal law enforcement agency, we were called in, and we had body worn cameras, which those pictures all have to be kept for certain with a FOIA request and things like that. So we definitely have that. I think the bigger question is what happened to that particular data, and how do we make sure, as some of the panel members mentioned, about access in the right way across the board. I think that's what the challenge is, right? And again, as you know, our social security numbers, other things, you get information has been hacked before, so you can only be so careful, and you do that. Unfortunately, it's amazing the amount of attempts we get on our system on a daily basis is mind-boggling. I just can't go into numbers, cannot talk about. It is mind-boggling. I think I want to tell you, they are trying to attack us from every angle. I can tell you that. It is insanity, the amount of access we get. This simple app here, we found one IP address yesterday, 500,000 attempts. Somebody wrote a bot probably trying to do something, and with a domain name of .ru. So .ru means, right? So where it's coming from. So I'm just saying, this is where we're dealing with every day on that basis. So our best we can do is secure data as possible, multiple layer of authentication. We have 2FA everywhere pretty much. We are doing a bunch of other things. Encrypt data for sure, right? Data encryption absolutely is required. Who manage those keys are very, very important. And from our perspective, I can tell you something, that's the highest priority for us, because the amount of hits we are taking on a daily basis, because we're open, right? Our applications are open to public, right? You guys use it. Global Entry, one of them. There are other traders are another one. So we get massive hits because of that. So we are fending off a bunch of stuff, and we have a very good security. Our cyber team is very, very good, and we talked about forensics and doing the logs, keeping a track of that, just making sure if seeing any anomalies there. But the problem is with anomalies, it's too late already. That's the problem, right? So that's why we're trying to make sure we be as proactive as possible making sure our data is secure.
I think we are being a leader in that area. It's a whole of government effort. The White House recently released a statement on, AI and rights as part of that. There's ongoing dialogues in the White House about privacy issues. We've seen, Congress and others wrestling with, data localization and debates around things like TikTok and other, global applications that have privacy and civil liberty concerns. In different regulatory bodies and international dialogues. We're talking with our European colleagues on shared values related to, protection of our citizens' information. And so I think it's having an impact, but it's a continued dialogue in which the American public has to be part of the conversation, and it's their equities that are in play. And so no one agency or component really has the whole perspective. This is a whole of government, whole of nation challenge, and it will continue to evolve as capabilities evolve. And we want to have that transparent engagement with the relevant and affected parties.
Agreed on the whole of government side of things. And it's, this is the case for moving slowly, being deliberate, and very much recognizing that you don't operate in a silo, and that the work that we do and the data that we share is going to, once you share it, it lives a life outside of ourselves, outside of DOJ, outside of our own component, and just setting up the safeguards to the extent possible, being careful, doing our homework ahead of time. And I think we're seeing a lot of that already happening.
And
although to Jacob's point, I don't think I would interpret slowly as methodically, because in many of these cases, if you're not engaged at staying at the frontier, you don't have the insights about how to do things right. And so I do believe there has to be some risk tolerance and understanding that in any kind of rapid innovation sector, you learn in part by doing. And that doesn't mean you do everything that's possible, but in some point, you have to be engaged in the cutting edge research to know what the second, third, and downstream implications are. And so I hope being methodical and deliberate is not always seen as in tension with staying current and relevant.
Mm-hmm. And to kind of wrap up, if you guys could talk to yourselves of 5 or even 10 years ago, what's the top piece of advice that you would give yourself about your approach to data and the work that you do?
I'll just say I am a believer in what's sometimes termed relentless incrementalism. I've been in the Pentagon for 14 years and seen how doing the right thing in a lot of little situations over time aggregates to a big impact. And sometimes, particularly in technology spaces, people just want to do one big, massive, clean slate solution that will, wipe away all the sins of the past. And that often is not executable in large organizations. And so the patience and fortitude and camaraderie necessary to be a relentless incrementalist in driving change is an important part of getting things done in our culture.
I would say to control what I can control and clean up over time.
Yeah, I think very well said. I think completely agree with both the panelists here. I think from my personal experience, I would say incremental steps is probably one of the trying to boil the ocean kind of defeats the purpose, and we have seen that. I've learned that lesson myself. And moving the ball forward, I was telling my wife, as long as I leave my CTO office better than when I inherited, I think it's a good thing. It's a good thing. So
here.
Thank you.
I think just making sure you have a really clear sense of the goal, the deliverable, before trying to figure out the architecture, before trying to build something out of thin air that seems like a good idea on paper, or obtaining some new service or solution. Let the needs dictate the back end, dictate the architecture, not the other way around, which sometimes can be easier said than done.
Mm-hmm. And I know Sunil mentioned this a little bit, but because, you've got a mix of government industry people here, is there anything that you guys are working on that you would really like the people here to engage with you with, to pay attention, to look up?
Yeah, absolutely. So we have created a portal within CBP called Business Connection Portal. It's a way to engaging. It's like, my boss the CIO is particular about equity and process. And it's worked very well for us. It's a nicely done portal. And it's not only for OIT. What we have done is that same portal also engages OFO, the blue uniform, Border Patrol, the green uniform, and we are adding other uniforms also within that. So, but to engage with OIT technology, it's available on Google. You can Google it, and it's called CBP Business Connection. Please register and then engage with us. A lot of exciting work in that space, in space in general within CBP. So I personally, I said 2 areas I'm concentrating on: the edge computing, lots going on as I mentioned, the space, and also large language models. So working on those. That's I was looking at LLM before ChatGPT as an FYI, so it's not trying to be a copycat with ChatGPT. So I was doing before that, and because I think that's going to help. How do we access data? How do we, localize data? How do we access very quickly, right? Because, nothing against any of the vendors. Currently, some technologies we have, you search something, there are 1,000 different things comes out. Which one do you pick, right? So things like that, we're trying to make that easy. And the marriage between operation technology and information technology is the area I'm right now concentrating on.
So for us, it would be mainframe to the cloud. So migrating our mainframes to the cloud is going to be a big deal for us over the next 5 years. And so if you've got experience with doing that, we're looking to move off of our mainframes and move them to the cloud. So if you got experience with that in a way that we can do it where it doesn't disrupt the business of the agency, love to hear your thoughts on that.
We're working with our CIO on implementation of zero trust in the cloud and making sure that we can move towards attribute-based management of our data. We also, host a variety of advanced analytic tools to help provide decision and insight for a variety of applications, both, business applications as well as real-time operational applications. And we're also thinking through, how do we better tag and label the data that we have to make it easier for training new algorithms in the future, and having the right, test and evaluation and other tooling in a hosted environment that vendors can come in and, get access to the data they need and help us develop the right algorithms for advanced applications. That's the ecosystem we're trying to build in the data fabric we're developing.
If you look at the DOJ data strategy, you'll see it's very almost singularly focused on really building out enterprise-wide systems, enterprise-wide solutions, ensuring that we're not 100 components doing each with its own fiefdom doing its own thing. So I think any solutions that can help build that and help kind of consolidate what we already have and get a sense of what's going on everywhere so that we can collaborate more easily, share more easily, enterprise-wide. I think that's going to be big in the next few years.
Excellent. And I think I've got about 5 minutes left. So is there anyone in the audience that has any pressing question they'd like?
What about citizen development, enabling the citizens, the common business user who does know the subject matter experts that Peter was talking about, enabling them to develop based on certain guidance, awareness?
Yeah, so I can take that. We, as I said, we have 65,000 force agency on the government side, along with the contractors. We do encourage that, but the thing is, the areas, another word which is really, really highly used in my opinion is overuse of low code, no code. There's nothing on low code anymore. Okay, please don't use that. Okay, even no code is also low code is also stretching it. No code doesn't exist in my opinion, right? So what we are doing is citizen developers, especially in the RPA space, I mentioned we're trying to teach them how to fish. That area seems to be picking up for us a little bit. But software development in general is a complex process. I'm a software engineer myself by trade. And it takes some time, because we talked about enterprise-wide scaling, we talked about integration, we talked about all those components. Yes, some folks do like to do that 100% within some of the offices are amazing. And I had one gentleman in Vermont, Office of Field Operations for the blue uniform, wrote a pretty interesting API to interact with some of the work they're doing. We share that. We have a common API gateway, which we advertise across the board. Anybody can use that. So those are kind of things that is very rare. But I would say in our shop, RPA is one area where we are encouraging definitely citizen development for sure. Anywhere else is too complex. There's too many things can go wrong. Integration, So we have set up developers teams who would do that. We have agile-based 2-week agile development process we have. So we just follow that. But other thing what happens is we do that, you're also encouraging shadow IT in certain cases, right? So we're trying to avoid that. So as long as it is within the realm of correct way of doing it, I tell you, the RP has really worked well for us.
Anyone else have any thoughts on that one? Yeah.
So when you're looking at, say, like on-prem versus migrating to the cloud, plus algorithm training, plus deploying to an endpoint as an investment versus paying a person to do it manually, what metric do you use to see if that was a good investment over time?
Yeah, we have a lot of operational experience. I can talk a little bit about that. So one thing when we start looking at cloud, we have two things going on. One was our data center is closing down in 2025. Supposedly, we'll see what happens because it's a national security systems. Let's see what happens. That's 2 more years from now. So we were in a rush to move application to the cloud. One thing we came out for sure, lifting and shifting is not allowed, right? In certain cases, you may not have a choice, right? Some cards product like financial cards products, heavy, the large names. I'm not taking vendor names. Large systems who you depend financials on, though you don't have a choice because you cannot rewrite a financial system from scratch. It's very, very complicated. But other applications, what we have done, either you refactor or you rewrite in certain areas. That benefit we have seen a lot within the cloud investment for us, because we are paying, if you're doing containerized applications, we are paying pennies to a dollar compared to like you're taking, lifting and shifting and using somebody else's hardware to pretty much execute the same thing, right? So we have seen that. Other area where we want to take advantage of, I mentioned the high value assets for us is on the data side, right? Now, data is also becoming pennies to a dollar, especially large object stores, what used to be costing a lot of money from legacy systems. I hope there are no legacy folks here. Those are very expensive, right? Those legacy systems, I think you're talking about the legacy large data providers, right? That is complete. The cloud providers have taken that cost down dramatically, right? So we've taken advantage of that, but to re-architect that, taking advantage, making sure where the data resides. So this is the concept we talked about, especially in the warehouse, data warehouse component, data warehouse versus data lake concepts, what goes where, data goes where. We have benefited a lot with that kind of stuff. We had a 6 petabyte Hadoop cluster, which was taken out and put into a inexpensive store on a cloud. I mean, like fraction of that. So we have seen that a lot. I can tell you that big time. But again, make sure don't lift and shift. I'm telling you, you'll pay more money if you're not turning off your resources when you're not using it.
So let me piggyback on that for a second, because Gartner has a magic quadrant that we've been using, and it tells you, if you lift and shift an application or if you refactor it, kind of gives you some guide rails, if you will, about what you would gain. But we looked at the total cost of ownership of what it would take to move whatever it was that was in the data center into the cloud. And so I head up what is known as the Federal Special Interest Group under the FinOps Foundation, where we look at how do you manage your cloud spending in the cloud. And so one of the things that most agencies have done, and we had this mass rush to the cloud, everybody picked up all of their stuff and they just threw it to the cloud. And so we're laughing because Now you're acting like a family with all the lights on in the house, and cloud is getting a bad rep.
That's correct.
And so the FinOps Foundation and the work that we've been doing with them, we've been able to manage and work from a consumption-based management of the cost. And so we start with what was our on-prem cost, and we use that as the baseline to optimize once we get into the cloud. So then you're like a dad running around the house, turn off that light, turn off that light, turn off that light. So if you're not using that VM on the weekends, turn it off. If your operating hours are from 8 to 5, turn off those VMs after 5. Scale that down, because cloud is not just what you use, is what you don't use also.
That's correct.
And so if you don't optimize the cloud, you're still not going to get the value. I don't care whether you lift and shift it, whether you refactor it, whether you rewrite it. You have to optimize that spending once you get there.
Very well put.
All right, perfect. Well, if that is it, I am once again very thankful for our panelists who took the time to talk to us today. That was a wonderfully engaging conversation. And thank you guys for being here.
All right, thank you, panelists and Jesse. Next up, we have our last panel. If I could have my panelists come up here and take a seat. All right, fantastic. Thank you all so much for being here. To start off this panel, I want you all to introduce yourself, who you are, what agency you represent, and what your role is there. So we'll just go down the line. We'll start with you first, and then we'll go down that way.
Trying to figure out which mic I'm using. My name is Hengi Hu. I'm the Chief Data Analytics Officer at the CPSC.
Hi, everyone. I'm Lauren Pavlik. I'm the Chief for Data and Software Services at the Enterprise Cloud Management Agency for the U.S. Army.
Good morning. I'm Bill Sullivan. I'm Vice President General Manager for Denodo.
Jason Kane, Secret Service, and I'm in charge of our Office of Investigations.
Pete Burns, Enterprise Data Architect with Jacobs Engineering. We are contracting with the Missile Defense Agency.
And then we have someone online. Go ahead.
Good morning. My name is Amberly Carter. I'm the Enterprise Data Officer at the Texas Department of Public Safety.
Thank you. How's the volume in the back? Can everyone hear the panelists okay? All right, cool. So to get started, I want to talk about looking into the future. So as we look into the future, our data architecture will have surely evolved. I think that's fair to say. What data management approaches are you taking today in order to help you future-proof for tomorrow? We don't need to go in any particular order, but when you guys are ready to kind of share your thoughts around that, go ahead and jump on in. Who wants to start?
I'll go first.
Go ahead.
I'm probably the least qualified of this panel when it comes to Chief Information Officer. I'm not in charge of that part with the Secret Service, but I do have a large data swath that kind of comes with criminal case data. We have tons of it. And then how to manage it is going forward in the future. Like you think of enterprise level things that kind of ride their email, phone, certain data streams. But then there's also all this dirty data that we get from cases that DOJ kind of mentioned beforehand, criminal cases, tons of it. Obviously, everything is electronic now. Everything's cyber enabled. What do I do with it? Because my CIO doesn't want it touching his network because it's full of malware and different things. So now I'm in charge of kind of managing that. And I have a few computer scientists that work with me to kind of say, how do we make sure we're meeting regulatory compliance? Also make it useful to the workforce and then making it enterprise wide. So that's kind of like one of our big challenges of how to do that and how to make it spread out to where it's tactically useful, but also not harmful to the enterprise.
Go ahead.
Sure. So I'd like to, talking about our current state and how we, give you guys a picture about, where we're at, our maturity. We have 5 core sites. We have about 150 business partners. We have, and so right now we're really at a point in our data maturity is we're getting the governance started. So our data management approach with the architecture, the architectural pattern is we have the data program office as part of our overall architecture. The data program office is establishing the policies and we instrument that through the data governance layer. And so this is a way for us to start to really build out the management and practice within the organization. When we look to the future, our way that we're thinking about continuing to measure this is very much of a concept like a data ops or the infinity layer, and say, how are we doing with the policies? How are the policies impacting the collaboration, the overall goals going forward? It's a major goal for our organization to really start to share and safely share. And you think about many of these agencies, they started out as research and development organizations. They have incredible silos of data that need to be shared. And just from a culture perspective, and also the limits of sometimes just the way the infrastructure has been built out. This is how we're building it out. So that's our starting point, and that we continue to measure it.
Thank you. Who else would like to jump in?
I'll go next. So one of the biggest things about doing future data architecture is the structured and unstructured data. And I think you mentioned this with the data governance and so forth. And that's one of the absolute keys, I believe, in that sense. And there's also an element, and Jason, I think you hit on this earlier, about just getting started. All right. And it's all about our data journey and discovery and getting through that. And then I know it's a beast, right, of how do we capture all of our legacy data, our current data, our modernized software data that we've got going on, and then how do we package it all together? What's our end state? What are we trying to get to? Is it a business? Is it tactical? And so how do we bring that? And so for us at the Army, it's how do we bring it to the edge for tactical? And then how do we help accelerate within the business operations that we do within the Army? So there's several layers to that. And so within the data governance and having a plan for structured and unstructured data, and how that's going to come together, whether it be through data, allowing for data products to be discoverable, or having those services and processes enabled to accelerate that, is really going to future-proof, as you stated, I think, the way ahead. So anyway, that's my perspective.
Thank you. Go ahead, Dr.
Oh, so I just want to say something for the users, because I'm a data scientist and I always consider myself a data scientist before program manager, administrator. So my concern, right, is that we're talking about infrastructure and not enough of the conversation hits whether or not it's actually useful for the data scientist. I think there's a lot of buzzwords going around like AI/ML, right? And we are all so eager to dump money into it. The question is, what is it that you're trying to achieve with this technology? And with the understanding that government, unfortunately, is behind our peers, right, in the private sector. And I think I say that because we all know this is true. So the question is, you're making up that gap. And I think as the person who's in charge of the analytical capability, I also just want to say that, it's not possible to do without involving the CIO, the CISO, the CTO. So it's not just about the architecture. Being able to look at it holistically is very important. And it starts with the question of not how do we play catch up, or how do we get enough systems so that we're modern, but what is it that our users really need? And maybe our users need a solution that's 2 years old, or maybe we need to keep up our legacy systems, right, while getting on these new solutions and working through the personnel issues related to that. Because we're all trying to do more with less. We're all trying to do more with the same, right? And then I think these are very pressing issues in the next 5 years, especially, now that general purpose AI is going to start becoming widely available. I really do believe this is going to take a lot of the work from some of our entry-level analysts. And I'm interested in knowing how that works. So,
William.
I think it's important to remember that government has more data and is growing data faster than just about anybody in the commercial area. Denodo has been working with a number of our national nuclear security agency customers, the national labs, for a number of years. They use us to manage some of the largest, most diverse sets of data, both structured and unstructured. So we've learned a fair amount about how to do this. A couple of observations. First, don't step on your own air hose. Recognize it's a complex problem. You're right, we're a little bit behind, but the size of data, if you're a theater commander, you're trying to integrate data everywhere from structured and unstructured, from the birds, from ISR, from the ships, the subs, to understand where you are, where your assets are. And then if you're at a battalion level, you're trying to figure out, okay, I've got 30 tanks. If I run them for 30 days, 50 miles a day, what's that going to do for my logistics stream? Okay, so there are complex problems that government faces that others don't. And this drives a couple of realizations. First and foremost, there will always be a heterogeneous environment. There's going to be AWS, there's going to be Google, there's going to be Microsoft, there's going to increasingly, I've heard people say nice things about Oracle for the first time in years. But be that as it may, recognize the complexity. And then of course, there's the issue of security. And how do we manage this all securely? So so we've learned from our experience that heterogeneity, a couple of guiding principles. Number one, you can't replicate. There was an executive at AWS Invent conference back in December that came on stage, the main stage, and said 0% replication. So if you're trying to replicate data around your environment in order to manage it, there's too much of it. It's growing too fast. You'll choke. You'll drown in the wave. So trying to avoid that replication. Secondly, being again in government, ensuring that people that have access to that data are legally entitled to have access to that data. So having that paradigm built, having the technology that's necessary to support it. Third, the availability, touched on artificial intelligence applications, the ability to create an architecture that allows you to share data from your Microsoft Azure instantiation to new AI applications you're testing out in the AWS environment, because most of them start over there. But government needs to be able to test them before they put them into production. So these are certain things that some of our customers have used us for that they believe are important in government. So.
Thank you. And Amberly, do you have anything you'd like to add?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. I would like to offer potentially a more unique perspective. When I came on with the Texas Department of Public Safety, they did not have data warehouses or data lakes that most organizations already had in place for their architecture. So what we did is we stood up a data lake house, and it's cloud-based. And for those who are not familiar with that, it basically marries the best of both worlds of the warehouse and the data lake together. And as that is architected in the cloud, we now have the capabilities of, as new services are introduced, we can build that into our architecture and continue to modernize as we continue to grow in our agency and capabilities continue to grow. And all of this, to the AI and ML point, allows us to be cloud-based, which is essential for doing anything with AI because it's massive amounts of data. But it also allows us to bring in those new services to our architecture to enable the data science functionality of AI.
Thank you, Amber. And if there is at any point questions from the audience, please just raise your hand. We'd love for you to jump in and ask questions for our panelists as well. Moving on, though, I want to talk a little bit about KPIs. What types of KPIs would you recommend applying to your data architecture?
Let's go.
Go for it.
You did great last time. Well, this is as I said, we're in our early phases here, and so it's really me, definitely testing and validating the architecture with our clients against use cases, and so one of the first ones that is critical is the time to market. But so that's from the consumer perspective, and then from the provider perspective is that what's going to market is authoritative data source and authoritative data. So when I'm looking at this, we've gone down the checklist that, the customer is able to access the authoritative data, the correct data. We've already have the access controls in place. The right customer's getting the right stuff. And then what we're able to do is work with that consumer and say, okay, based on what you were able to do before, how does this compare? And then you have a very good metric in saying, okay, this is a good way to look at this, as a starting point. Our journey has been, overcoming a lot of, it's a culture change. It's a huge culture change. There's a lot of objections and some of the things that, and a lot of challenging, different challenging directions and solutions. So in fact, one of the previous speakers was talking about how important it was to get the tools in front of the people to help them put it into their own words and, see the value of it. So that's the other, so that's another metric that I use. This is a personal one. It's converting the doubter. So this is my own, where I'm working with customers who've had a lot of objections. They have their own solutions, but they don't necessarily align with the goals of where we're trying to go as an agency, and with the longer term missions. So converting them to get them on board to use and then I know that they're actually, if they're able to do that, they are working within our intent with the architectural patterns. So that's where I'm going.
Thank you. Go ahead.
I'll jump in there. So as a performance metrics different coming from government, right? Because we don't have the same customer base, again, value to a certain degree. Cost is obviously important as a first performance metrics, because if I'm going to buy it, I need to show some value out of it. The second part, and he hit on this, and my DoD colleague has also hit on it, is value to the end user. And also at the end of the table regarding this AI bubble, which the last panel was very good at discussing. I'm using AI now, but I cannot apply AI broadly because people don't know how to use it. At the end of the day, you have to design models on the front end and the back end. And two, in a criminal sense, Minority Report, which is an old movie, kind of an old reference. I can't just decide that AI is going to predict who's going to be the next criminal. So it's not that. It's more of how do I work more efficiently? So for me, the metrics are mainly my cost and can I show it to be a value to me? And then two, is it a value to the end user and or users that I can have? Those are kind of like the two most valuable, because once I can show that value, then the cost is negligible to me.
Okay. So for me, I'm going to go back to my previous role when I was CIO for Program Executive Office Soldier. And one of the key performance indicators, for our data architecture was either cost control performance for acquisition or directly related to whether or not the soldier wanted the product, right? And so when we went to our soldier touch points and we get feedback on whatever product was coming out, that was, it goes back to your point of value to the end user, which we still have to value in the government. We still have our cost control performance to go back to Congress and all of our other stakeholders, which is absolutely important and imperative for our stakeholder engagement. But I also think some of the things that are unique to the Army or unique to each different type of industry is getting to that core user, right? So for me, that's a soldier. And any warfighter that we're partnering with and so forth. So our audience for any key performance indicator is huge. And so if you're not mapping to who your audience is and who your end users are for each of the different data models that you have going forward within your architecture, you're going to quickly miss your mark, I think. And so, having an understanding of where, if it's your commander's dashboard, and then you've got all of the listings of what visualizations and all the different graphs and fun charts that really send that message of where we are in the program. That's fantastic, right? But then also, what are the statistics and metrics and indicators that we've met the mark architecturally for the soldier to meet mission, right? And so understanding your audience, I think, is one of the biggest elements that, you really have to engage them throughout the entire life cycle of what you're doing with data, to get those appropriate feedback loops, to get it right. Because you could deliver something, and if you didn't engage your user, did you actually meet it? So that's kind of where my thoughts are, and then just making them reasonable for people to achieve. Because that's one of the things when you're going through your data journey that, as you guys have mentioned, we're all in the early phases, but I think it's just because we're all trying, right? We're all getting out there. We're all putting our data architectures together. We're all putting that, and as we're changing that culture around being data centric, which for me is the number 2 priority of our secretary, is being data centric. We have to allow KPIs that are reasonable, achievable, and we want them to feel successful. Because this is kind of a scary route for some, right? Who may have been typically down the cyber route or down the infrastructure route. And so now we're talking about data and software. Oh, goodness, right? And so one of my things is always trying to make those key performance indicators reasonable, attainable, so that they feel successful after each sprint or at the end goal when we get there. And so that people feel motivated along the way to keep getting us further and further into success. So those are just my couple thoughts between the people and the technology.
Thank you.
So I have a rhetorical question, right, for folks here and also in the audience. I tell you 70% of our staff has been trained on a tool. What does that mean to you? Does that mean you look at it and say, well, there's 30% left that's left to train, right? But are those people actually proficient? Are they using it to meet a mission? Are they happy with the tool, or are they forced to use it? So I think there are some KPIs that are programmatic and they're kind of out of our control. They're there when we show up at the agency. And then I think there's some that we set ourselves. And I think can't tell you which KPIs to set. I can only say if you're going to set one, make it meaningful, right? Have it drill down enough that you're asking the right questions. And I think the outcome, right? And I'm all about data driving things, is that make sure your data is driving the right thing. So maybe 70% training is extremely good because half the folks that take it are actually becoming subject matter experts, right? So the goal here is not to get 100%, is to see whether or not, the saturation actually happens. So these KPIs, I think they're very interesting to me. I've written enough reports about them to know that, maybe, half of them we kind of just do on the spot, right, at the end of the year. And then half of them we really care about because it impacts the mission. So I really care about the latter. The front 50, I already know we're going to meet it, right? Because if we don't, there's going to be hell to pay. So it's really the other 50. How do you set that up in a way where you're really taking care of your people and you're being fair to the products and services that are available? I think that's something that I think about quite often.
Thank you. William, did you want to jump in?
I think when it comes to KPIs, there's a couple that come to mind. Number one, cost, and there's 3 elements to cost. Number one, what's the initial installation and setup costs? That's a rounding error typically on the life cycle of a program, but it's something you need to think about. Number 2, what is the management cost? In other words, what's the overhead? Everything creates opportunity, but it creates a certain expense. So the solution not be more expensive than the problem it's trying to fix. And this is where government talking to each other really matters. Okay, if Morgan's great thing technically, you don't walk across the street and tell Merrill Lynch because it's a competitive advantage. But if the Air Force does something well, tell the Navy. Okay. If agriculture does something really well, tell Commerce. That's one of the beauties of trying to wring out some of the complexity in the government environment. And the next thing, recognize there is an opportunity cost. If you spend $20 million here, that's $20 million you don't have to spend on something else. So ensure that you're prioritizing when you're doing an acquisition, what has the greatest impact in your overall architecture plan. So those are 3 components of cost. The next one I'd look at is what is the number of customers served. I was mentioning the U.S. Army Logistics and Data Analytics Center is a customer of Denodo. And what they do is they haven't really marketed it a lot, but a lot of people have started to come to them because, as I offered in that example a moment ago, a battalion commander is going to run 30 tanks for 30 days, 5 hours a day. Which tanks are going to have to go in for depot level maintenance? Which ones can we handle here in the field? Those types of analysis can be done with component ordering of parts. what's the cost of the program over time, running those scenarios. So it's not just, hey, we've got this capability, but how many people is that capability going to serve? And that's a senior level analysis of, are we maximizing technology's impact on our agency or our services mission? And then the other one I liked very much was the time to value. The reason we have a cloud is not because it's cheaper to store your data in C2S or in AWS buckets. The reason is because it allows you to move quicker. Again, as I touched on earlier, there's a lot of AI application. I'm not pitching for AWS. Each one of the cloud providers has their own unique value proposition. In AWS, they mask the computing well, which is one of the reasons that you can have somebody create an app without having to hire a $300 an hour Python programmer to do it for them. Okay, so if you want to access those apps, those AI apps, you can do that in AWS, but you have data on premise, you have data in Google and Microsoft. So the KPI is, what is the time to value of any given technology investment that is going to move my missions forward? And that's a critical one. And I also I go back, ensuring ensuring the data that you have is verifiable. That's a great one. So thank you.
Thank you. And Amberly, I want to hear from you too. I promise I'll call on you first for the next one, so you don't keep coming
great.
last.
I'll look forward to that. Thank you so much. Basically, my response is in line with the rest of the panel. There's some great KPIs you can gather just on how much data do you have in your architecture, how frequently is it being used. But that doesn't really tell the story of the value of your enterprise architecture. It really is in the outcome, because this is it's a data lifecycle. So what has that valuable data delivered? Have you been able, from our perspective, to arrest a violent offender because you've been able to gather all that information together? The hardest part, in my opinion, from a business perspective, is how you validate that. So if I've got all that information together for violent offenders and a trooper arrests a violent offender, is it a direct result of what we've set up at our agency with our architecture and our analytics? Or did they just happen to go on the street and arrest that person because they had a warrant? So that's the challenge that we see in data, is being able to tie that business value, that outcome, to what you've been able to produce for the enterprise.
Thank you. And are there any questions from our audience before we continue? Or make sure everybody got enough time to say everything that they wanted to? All right, cool. Well, Amberly, I promised I would call on you first. So I want to know, do you see a path for promoting agility in your architectures to adapt to mission needs?
I do, and I believe I touched on this a little bit earlier in the sense of how we have architected our enterprise architecture, being able to move at the speed that technology is able to release new features or services, to be able to engage in that. I know it's not quite the same, but we do run agile. We're here, we run sprints, so we're able to evaluate what those needs are, have our architects focus on new technologies, always be invested in learning opportunities, so you can see what's out there and how we can apply that to our business. So if there's a need from a specific division for something and we can implement that in our architecture and make value out of that, we will. There's a lot of opportunity there. It's for some a struggle to get there, depending on where their architecture resides and the flexibility and fluidity around that.
Thank you. Thanks for kicking us off. All right, back to our table. Who wants to jump in?
Well, this is one of my favorite subjects, so I'm happy to follow Amberly. So agility, the only way for us to do this successfully, in my opinion, is to be agile, adaptive, and allow, it allows us to fail fast and it allows us to succeed fast, right? So I don't see another way. We can't live in a world of waterfall, at least in my experience, because we don't necessarily know if we've met the mark at the end. So everything about data and as quickly as this is evolving and as quickly as we want to get to AIML, I don't see another way to get there without being agile and flexible and adaptive to what we're learning. Because all of this, at least in the government perspective, we are constantly learning and seeing new technologies and seeing different options and different ways to do business. And so that is the core of being agile. And so I am super passionate about how this allows us to meet mission need and to allow that feedback and do it iteratively and seeing how over even a 2-year span, how much you can accomplish doing those. For me, I found 2-week sprints to be the most effective in allowing development teams and various functional teams to even become part of that process. And so when you partner in that way, I've just seen teams blossom and really thrive off of each other and accelerate in ways that I haven't seen before in the government. And so where government may have different stereotypes, I just don't see it, because when I'm working in an agile environment, it seems to be going as quickly at the speed as we're allowing it to go. So I think this really accelerates and allows us to be adaptable, especially for military and what different things are happening in the world events that we need to adhere, react to. So I think that's where I find it to be of such value to meet mission need.
Love that. Thank you. Who else would like to jump in? Go for it, Pete.
Oh, there's a lot of good stuff on this one. So there's the expectation from the outset is that we will absolutely be agile. And, the expectation is there's always going to be new tech. There will be new demands. That'll be an outcome from success. When we are successful with our, data solutions, that moves us up the maturity ladder. We will have new operations that will, essentially happen. And so this is something that, we have to be able to expect. And absolutely, there's going to be the feedback loop that has to happen from the onset. So the principles of adhering to the governance, to having a common access control layer, where we're ensuring that there's visibility and accessibility to authoritative data sources. When we adhere to that, and we think about that, we will be able to continue to mature it. That's kind of the way I've seen it. Yeah.
All right, who's next?
So, whenever I work with subject matter experts, I tell them, absolutely, yes, you should use all the AIML and all the fancy new models. And yes, we'll figure out how we can upload this data, make sure it's secure, go and do what you need to do. And then I say, well, hold up a second. We're also all bureaucrats here. So there's executive orders, there's OMB memos, there's internal policies and all of these things that we have to adhere to before you can go out and take over the world. So I think, yes, anything agile is great, and the agile process I'm a big fan of. And I also told my bosses, I told the commissioners, I'm also not against dragging things along programmatically, right? If we can do things in a sandbox and show you the value, right? It doesn't have to come from you and what you want to do. I can show you the value and what this process can do for us. And then maybe you'll champion it, right? And I think that's worked to some degree in the past. I'm still trying to figure out how this works at my current agency. But I think innovation is interesting in the government space, which is, not every single innovative thing, not everything that's achieved quickly ultimately survives the gauntlet of policies and governance. But yeah.
Jason, you want to go?
I'll jump in there. So I laugh because I say we move at the speed of government, which is usually pretty slow. In Secret Service world, I only have 9,000 employees, which is what DOD has. Probably way more than that. So they can, way more than that. I do have the flexibility though, and we absolutely follow that kind of framework. To my colleague at the end of the table, my computer scientist comes to me probably once every week, and he's gonna take over the world in about a half hour. And I have to turn him down a little bit because I'm like, we can't do that to a certain degree. And he's like, I don't know why not, but his brain works differently than mine. I'm worried about going to prison, and he's worried about doing something else. So but at the end of the day, he's a very sharp guy, and his team is very sharp. But again, they come to me with a lot of these things in a very agile environment, and we have a lot of flexibility there because we don't have certain requirements on what I call non-enterprise data. I can kind of use it from I get data from a lot of sources from around the world that I can kind of manipulate and try to use to our advantage where I can. It's just a matter of what are the outputs of that. Again, going back to the metric of before, what's validated, what's useful. So short version.
Thanks. And William.
I guess when it comes to agility, and here I'm talking about the agility in a technical architecture, not the agility in waterfall design or software engineering. Be careful of and try to avoid the one-size-fits-all solution vendors. Okay. It's kind of like the Hotel California. You can check in, but you can never leave. And you ever try to get your data back, it's going to be a dog's breakfast. And so that's really why, Tableau and Calibra and Denodo have come together to underwrite this morning's discussions, was because we're trying to share with you a flexible architecture, right? All of you have already made an investment in one or more of our companies. And it's just real important. We have an obligation to you then to say, okay, here are other government folks that are using us, and here are some approaches that might work for you. Again, it's that collaboration in government, which is unique. Yes, it's bigger. Yes, it's more complex, but you have the benefit of being able to talk to your friends. And that's what we're trying to do here. And Lauren said something which I love and I agree with completely, the idea of fail fast. Again, the presence of the cloud allows you to do exactly that in a safe and closed way. Okay. The value proposition in government is keep me out of the newspaper, right? You're the CEO of a bank. The value proposition is I need to, grow revenue, grow profitability, grow market share. That's the value proposition. The profit motive, the value proposition in government is keep me out of the newspaper. So there's a built-in resistance to failure in government. And 50% of IT projects in the commercial sector fail anyway. They just don't advertise them. It's a spring sport in a lot of state capitals of finding what IT project went wrong. And so, but now in a flexible environment where you have access to the clouds, you have that opportunity to try to connect new technologies and to fail fast. Brilliant point. And ultimately that's it. How will my architecture allow my agency or service to advance quickly? How can I fail fast without, critically damaging my operations? And that's really what a flexible architecture will allow you to do.
Thank you. Yes. Do we have any other comments?
One quick comment. Since you hit on the fail fast element, I think it's also really important to have psychological safety in your teams, especially when you're changing government culture, that failing fast is okay.
Yeah.
And that it's from a leadership perspective, and the leaders in the room know that, you're taking that risk in companies, right? But when you're in an environment that may be more risk adverse, allowing in an agile environment and so forth, and having that expressing and communicating on a routine basis to your team that it's okay to fail, that's part of the discovery and part of the learning campaign to be successful, and knowing that something didn't work, and that's perfectly okay. So I just wanted to hit that point on enabling psychological safety for people to feel comfortable to fail.
And it's so important because that's a leadership principle folks in the room should hear, right? I've done work with a lot of the money center banks in New York. Okay, they invest in new technology all the time. They'll go buy a license and they'll go play with it. And if it fails, it fails. They figure that's the price of admittance. Government tends to be, you go through all these things until you finally get to the end and you spend a lot of time, effort, and money. The advent of the cloud allows government to do the exact same thing without risk of failure. And it's critical that we do that because you have people that are writing applications that can materially improve the operation of government, and you can test them safely before you put them into production, and you don't have to buy them. But that's when an agile environment should look, and it allows that exact, I'm so glad you said it, thank you, that exact leadership philosophy to flourish.
Yes, great points. Any other comments from our panel?
I want to say
The psychological aspect of it is very important. We are very much averse to failing, right? It depends on which agency you're at. Sometimes, the failure is $100 million. Sometimes it's, $1 million, but it doesn't particularly matter, which is we want to minimize the risk as much as possible. And unfortunately, if you're dealing with something that's the state of the art, that risk is always inherent in what you're trying to do. So, I think it's something to think about too, which is, the empty chair, I would assume, is for Kristen. So she and I actually used to work in category management. For those of you who know what that is, we consolidate the buying powers of the government, which is, we would round things up to the nearest billion, right? Think about that. And when I was at the DHS, we're running it up to the nearest billion, and that would be our investment in a particular thing. So at that scale, right, we think about failure as, we can't do it. There's no option. And yet, 90% of AI ML models are exploratory. So these two things have to come to terms with each other. The amount of money that you spend on something, does that mean the return is going to be 100%? Most likely in the first couple of years of the period of performance, the returns are going to be pretty low. To the point about money as a KPI, it's something that I'm very aware of, and I try not to let that stifle innovation as best as I can.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions from the audience? All right. Well, then moving on to our last question here. Jason, let's kick it off with you this time. The theme of our panel is achieving the perfect data management approach. Are we optimistic that we will get to this utopia?
You wanted to lead with me on this one?
Yes.
I'm kidding. I think I don't think it's ever going to be perfect. As long as data is what it is, as long as it comes in unstructured and structured fashions and different ways. When I was on the National Security Council for 14 months, and one of the big things was nomenclature of language around the world. What does that mean? What does cyber mean here? What does cyber mean there? I say the same thing with data. We may be able to get everybody on board in the United States to do a thing, but getting the world to do it, it may be a much different thing. So getting to a perfect data utopia, I think might be a little bit more of we'll be having this conversation much longer after this, but that's my 2 cents.
Thank you. All right, who's next? You want to go for it, Amberly?
I saw you looking at me. I'm ready. I'm in agreement. As optimistic as I like to think myself to be, there's no such thing as perfect, not even as people. We always have room for improvement, and the same applies for data. You'll always have messy data that needs to get cleaned up. You'll always have data policies that need to be revised to address new standards or requirements. You'll always have new architecture to build. There are so many components that will just continue to come our way, and we'll continue to improve it, and we'll get our practices better, but never perfect. As long as I've been in the data world and networking with peers, we all have the same challenges, and yet still haven't quite solved the problems. We get little tidbits from each other and say, oh, I've tried this and it fails, don't do it. But I've also tried this and it works. And so we try that in our organizations to continue to improve. But I don't think we'll get to that dreamy utopia.
Thank you. Who else from our panel would like to chime in?
So don't let perfection be the enemy of the good enough. And sometimes the good enough is a 20% solution. It's just to get your feet wet, right? It's to do a sandbox. It's to do a proof of concept. It's not to be scared of what is to come. And so I think, as I started getting involved with this general purpose AI, right? This ChatGPT, which everybody in here should be using and getting familiar with, and not being scared of what it can do. I think this is a pursuit, right? The pursuit of a perfect data management strategy, of a perfect governance, of a governance board that does things perfectly, or gets as much of it as it can. You know, these are all things that I would go back to. The part about being agile is that you can't be agile in a perfect environment. There has to be some leeway to make mistakes. There has to be some leeway to pursue new things. And there has to be a lot of grace by the program managers, the directors in government with this new technology, and being able to say that, yeah, we are a little bit behind. We're trying to do things as best as we can. And this is what this means for our agency and nowhere else. Because I don't think there's ever going to be a unified, you know, here's how you get to a perfect data management strategy. You know, it depends on the politics of where you're at, depends on what your users are doing. But I really do believe, right, that instead of pursuing that perfection, I would say, what is that 20–50% solution? How do we get there? How do we show our bosses, right? Maybe even OMB in Congress, if you want to go that high, how do we show them that this is useful and pertinent so that we can get the funding for it? But yeah, so I would say, you know, let's not try to pursue that perfection, because I've never seen it, right? The technology is way too new to be able to do that. All I can say is let's get involved, right? Let's figure out what needs to happen to policy in order for us to use the API to upload our sensitive data to this AI stuff. And you know, just asking that question, I think, makes a lot of people nervous. And but we have to have it, right? Because this stuff is developing so fast that I think we will get left behind if we wait.
Thank you. Who else from our panel? Lauren?
So I'm in alignment with everyone. I have a little bit of a different twist, I think, a little bit on it in terms of pursuing more of the like the perfect effectiveness of the data, depending on what your end user and what your use case is. Pursuing effectiveness, whether it's your visualization, whether it's, you know, the type of data that you're information that you're providing your user, in any sense, whether it's a senior leader all the way down to my world soldier, warfighter. And so whether it's, they don't see the data model, I don't think they really care, right? But what they see is the information, and what they see is, did it spit out what I asked it to? Did it create the statistic that I need to see? Did it tell the message that I'm asking it to tell? Is it telling the story that we need to know? Did it meet mission, right? And so if we're not looking at that in terms of effectiveness, the data management approach doesn't really matter, right? Because it's not, we have to be able to adapt the data management and the data model approach that we're going after to fit the need of what our end state and value is to our end user and whatever our use case may be for that particular subject matter. So allowing that and thinking in terms of effectiveness, value, quality, and time, and getting it to, I think somebody said time to market and time to value. And I loved that. And so whether market is your government audience or your, you know, inside your command, that's where you're going to get your measurement and your KPI of effectiveness for your data management approach.
William, would you like to go next?
So in thinking about this question, it occurred to me that there are two people that promise you utopia. One is the saints. You're going to have to die to get there. Okay, so we probably don't want to take that one. The other, the communists, they're going to promise you utopia here. It's just going to feel like you're going to wish you were dead. So maybe when we look at utopian architectures, we want to limit our expectations a little bit. I look at history teaches us where we're probably going. I spent a lot of time in the ERP world, ran North American public sector for PeopleSoft. And I just think conceptually what we're heading towards, what we should aim for, is a view of your entire technical architecture as an ERP system, right? And how you interact with it right now is Tableau and the business intelligence screens you bring up and the reports that you create. But we're moving even past that to the point where, you know, ChatGPT and all these the new technologies coming online, that we're almost at the Jeffersons, right? Bring me a Coke and a hamburger, and it just comes over. We're almost there. And so I think, you know, as we select technologies and architectures and approaches moving forward, it's the conceptual view of where do we want to go of your entire technical architecture being pretty much an ERP system. don't get too enamored with the puts and the takes. But if you're defining your KPIs correctly and you're maintaining that agile architecture, we can get there more quickly. And that's, so I'm hard pressed. Obviously, I have my own vested interest in Denodo and our contribution to that effort. But I think as we're looking for it, maintaining a vision of where you want to go, we look at where we've been and we look at where we'd like to go. And then it becomes fairly easy to put in place those technologies, those approaches, management approaches that'll get you there.
Thank you. Pete, do you have anything you'd like to add?
Yeah, there's no utopia, so let's take care of that. But within an organization, have the common goal and communicate it frequently for the collaboration and drive, and then strategically drive it. And that's kind of so it's from, and I think that will always allow organizations to go in the right direction and to really take good measure of where they're at. Are we on the right track? Are we, going off? Are we not, that type of thing. And that is, and I think that's critical because when it's hard sometimes. It's really hard after you go, after a year. And if you don't look back at, because, I'm sure every one of us has had, sometimes weeks, months of pretty tough battles that, taken on. And you do have to go back and look at where you started and to see where you're going and to continue to polish. And I think that's critical. It's great feedback for organizations. It's great feedback for from leaders to the team members who are doing the work day in, day out, who are really critical contributors. So that's kind of my take on it.
Love that. Thank you. Any audience questions before we wrap up this discussion? All right. Well, then on that note, where was the question? Oh, go for it.
So I really love this last question because it kind of helped encapsulate the entire conversation. And the way I saw it is almost like when you're similar to what many of you were saying, that pursuit of perfection is almost like the epitome of that same old school waterfall approach. Let's spend forever finding the perfect solution, but the reality is perfection is a moving target that changes. What we thought was right 10 years ago is a totally different objective today. And so I think everyone in this group has very much showcased, the value and the knowledge of fail fast, experiment, let's figure out ways to solve it. The big challenge is that the customers that you're serving, the business, are the ones that also have to buy into the same vision. And so, I think people started to tie into that. How do you kind of help sell that value and help create that more learning mindset within your organizations to get people to understand the value of taking these, short, measured risks essentially, rather than potential failures, to help really guide them closer to success?
Good question.
Is that directed to me?
Oh, I was actually throwing it to the group, but
I'll let others go first. I have some thoughts on.
Go ahead. Gives us a chance to think.
Yeah,
You got an idea.
All right, well, I have to think too. How do I do it? So, just kind of day in the life type thing. I actually do flyby sales pitches in some cases to get people in front of it and go through and use their language and help them see what they're doing and do a comparison contrast, try to get people on board. It's very hard sometimes. If there's an entrenched culture. It is what they're very successful in the ways that they do their work. And sometimes overcoming that is really difficult. And so that's one thing I've been trying to do on a regular basis, almost daily with yourself. And so that's one approach, I guess. I don't know if that answers your question, but.
Are you meaning like success directly in the team, or do you mean success from the end user perspective? What angle? Because there's a way within the team, I think, to help them feel successful, and I can go down that path, or the end user for like adaptability.
Yeah.
Or adopted.
I was focusing kind of maybe more from an industry perspective, but I think ultimately the idea was just, I think, how do you help sell the great ideas that you have in your head across the organization?
That's exactly what.
Ultimately that piece.
Okay, I'll give you like 2 examples. So within the team, so I like to write 500-day plans. I think and of course, the closer you get to now, the more concrete we're feeling abilities, right? We've learned something, we can put it there. But I like to write 500-day plans that we have action items and deliverables that we're trying to achieve, right? And as we're going through learning, we can, map some of our backlog to what's going on in the action plan and what the 500-day plan will show. And then I like to bring the team in building that. So I bring the team in, what are their ideas? Where are we going with software and data services? What do we want from the platforms? What do we want these things to do? What do we want from the data team? And what do we think is in the realm of possible, and have them to help me define that. And then we come I like to see as much of a collection, our collective thoughts as we can, so that as we're building our sprint backlog and as we're building out our sprints and our immediate plans and the short-term, long-term goals, we are working together for that achievement. And so they see where we're going, they can see the long-term play, but like maybe what the little bite-sized chunks are going to get there in order to eat that whole sandwich. Right. And so then from the end user perspective, I think that's all about training and communication. And there's nothing short of over communication, right? Like that's emails, Teams channels, open office hours, like you talk about, like you name it, being available during that training time is going to get the end user engagement and the adaptability. And, again, that goes back to the psychological safety, being able to ask questions and not feeling like they're overwhelmed or it's too much. And trying to keep it as simple as possible, and creating a model where you're giving them small chunks at a time, so that just like you do on your phone, right? Like when we, first got Gmail in, what was it, 2005 or before, right? It's not the same Gmail that we have today in our personal lives, right? Like we iteratively learned all the new features along the way over the last 20 years. My colleague was shocked when I said 20 years for Gmail. And I was like, that's true. It's when you dropped your Hotmail account. And I'm concerned that you haven't dropped your Hotmail account. That way and the same thing with your iPhones or your Google phones, like whatever your choice is, right? They're constantly adding features and new things, and you don't even think about it. Right. So how do you get to that state in your professional life? When we're trying to accelerate this, so those are the 2 aspects I say. So that's where the training and the communication and, whether it's command videos and engagements and going to talk to programs and, getting them excited about it. That's half the battle. And I just nerd out on that. That's just too much fun to get people animated and caught up to it and get them pumped up. Because if we can get them pumped up around data engineering and data models, like that AI stuff that everybody wants, like it's going to just happen. But if you don't do the homework at the front, it's not going to happen. So those are my 2 perspectives on small chunks of success, to help build on that success and allow the fail fast and all that. So that's just life according to Lauren. I don't know if that helps or not, but there you go.
Thanks, Lauren. Would anyone else on the panel want to add to that? Go ahead, William.
I just, from the commercial side, we go in and out of government offices all the time. And you evaluate us and our technology, and we kind of look at it and say, okay, how's this place run? I mean, as professional salespeople, we look at architecture, strategy, structure, motivation, morale. And there is a generosity, and it's a wild variety across government, right? And I'm always curious to see the generosity of spirit. There are some folks, like I confess it, perfect, right? I mean, 500-day plans, where are we going? Changing priorities as we go. Over communicate. These are things I tell my team. I give myself a 90-day plan. They'll tell you about it. Sometimes I fail at it. Sometimes I do pretty good. It's self-judged, so I usually do pretty well. But that generosity of spirit is important because it causes people in government to want to learn and to adopt. And again, I love the articulating over communication, and maintaining that curiosity, assuring people it's a leadership function, assuring people it's okay to push. Now, sometimes you do. I mean, you got to say, okay, let's rein it back there, Pat. We're not gonna take the hill all in one day. Okay. But having those people on the team and how you treat them is just critical, because that's the energy. And, when you go in and out of, particularly the services, usually I see the most curiosity, passion around the 045 level. Those folks are still close enough to have been company commanders or, commanded a wing of planes or had a few assets under them. They know what happens when things don't go right. And they know with an immediacy what's possible when they do go right. And they know, we win or lose, win or die, you live or die. And so they have that immediacy. And sometimes as you get a little more senior, you lose touch with that. And so not losing touch with that, some of the greatest business leaders I've seen, they'll go down to the lunchroom, talk to everybody, figure out how's it going. It's right in the military. They say, you want to find out what's going on, go talk to a sergeant. They'll tell you, they know. And so that manifests itself in the evaluation and adoption of technology and the strength at which and the speed at which you evaluate and adopt that technology in any given agency.
All right, thank you. Great question. To wrap things up, I just want to go from stage right with Amberly all the way down to stage left with Pete. One key takeaway that you had from this conversation. Amberly, we're going to start with you.
Hoping to address your question appropriately, I think one good key one, I would really like to hear a podcast about things that Lauren says. She needs to come up with a really good, catchy title from her last statement. But sorry, didn't you say things that Lauren said?
Oh, Life According to Lauren?
Yes, that one.
Yeah.
I would love a podcast.
No, I just, when I try to say something that's more like my opinion versus government opinion, when I have my government hat on or something, and I just say Life According to Lauren. Yeah. I didn't think about it as a podcast, but there you go.
Other than that, I think one big key takeaway is that this really is as silly as it sounds, it's a team effort. We should not be siloed in our organizations and should be supportive of each other, and use those networking opportunities to talk about like how we're doing things, and what's working for us and what's not working for us, and review modernization together and see how we can leverage that so we're not all reinventing the wheel at the same time.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think the safety one is very important, because a lot of times what I'm trying to do is fail 100 times and succeed one time, and that one time is good enough. So I think that's a really great takeaway. And I also want to say that I think this idea of moving forward, this idea of newness, innovation, the state of the art, I'm hoping, right, and this is just me, I'm hoping that doesn't come from me. I'm hoping it comes from the new folks that come into government, right? I can't drive the innovation as much as I would like, because sometimes I get a very stratospheric view of what's going on. But I think enabling those that are coming and they're new, perhaps, or folks that want to express themselves in a very new and innovative way, to create the space, the safe space for them to do that, I think is a good takeaway for me.
Takeaway, these guys were all rock stars. So it was really fun to listen to everybody. And I always take away some little bit, and the KPI discussion was really interesting to me. So I'm taking away that. And I also appreciated that when I looked at this question about utopia, that I was like, I don't think that exists. And then, but I wasn't sure that anybody else felt that way. And then everybody said it, and I was like, yes, okay, great. We're on the same page. So those were some of my key takeaways, but ultimately these guys are all rock stars. So it's fun to listen to others.
We're going down the I don't have too much to add. I'll just say I don't need another job. I think I'm going to be the Lessons with Lauren podcast director. So
one thing is kind of a common theme across private sector government. The so what? Everything boils down to the so what. If you can't attribute that to the end user, the rest of it doesn't work. Kind of have a common fallacy that where I sit at headquarters, and kind of akin to what he just said. When you get too far away from the action, it's kind of the ideas that I come up with. I promise you, are not always good ideas. At least the end user would tell me that. What I found is if I can contribute to them in understanding the so what, why do we do this, then they become my own lobbying workforce for the product or for the innovation. what we want to do, because I can promise you the director of the Secret Service, even though I walk past her in the hallway quite a bit, she does not listen to me, but she will listen to the sergeant at the end of the day. So that's kind of my takeaway, is remember the so what when you're doing these things, because that is incrementally what you're trying to improve.
So first of all, this has been a great experience for me to be out here, so thank you everyone who's participated in the, in this conference. It's really been eye-opening for me. So key takeaways. Communicate often at all levels. That is an extremely important one, that's going to drive the collaboration. Collaboration is an extremely important goal, and then stay strategic and focused. And that is essentially also how we stay agile. So that's it.
Awesome. Thank you all so much. Thank you to everyone who came out today and all of our panelists prior to this one, of course, too. But a special thank you to Denoda and Tableau, because we wouldn't be able to do this without you. So thank you for that. For those who joined us today, check out our upcoming events. We've got one at the Marriott Metro Center next week discussing AI and data. You'll probably find that one interesting. And our annual GuideTech conference is coming up. That's April 30th to May 2nd. Get your ticket while we still have them. It is a lot of fun. But thanks, everyone, and I hope you have a great rest of your week.